Absolutely. Good evening. Beginning with Anderson.
Oh, yeah. Present. I expected some
Sarah?
more. Present.
Campbell.
Here.
Krask.
Present.
Jones.
Present.
Jordan.
Present.
McCoy.
Here.
Nelson.
Present.
Nugent.
Present.
Hunton.
Present.
Savage.
Present.
Cheryl.
Present.
And we have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you all very much. I want to start out our meeting this evening with, I know a lot of folks are excited about code reform, but I have a feeling that there are a lot of folks here that want to be part of a conversation and here in council chambers, one, to be heard, and two, after the incidents that have been taking place across the United States, I'd like to be able to address that at the very beginning of our meeting. And I'd like to be able to ask that of council that without objection, I'd like to move the mayor's comments portion of the agenda immediately after the public comment for items that are not on the agenda this evening. If that is acceptable to everybody, then I can give an update on what the administration has been doing for the past year, and I'd appreciate that. But I would like to hear from folks who have signed up for public comment first, if I may. But I want to start out our conversation this evening in solidarity with, I believe, members of our community and across the United States, and quite frankly, across the globe, in the actions that we have seen in many U.S. cities, but in particular in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where there have been 2 deaths at the hands of ICE agents in the last week or so, couple of weeks. And this is jarring. People are living with fear. They're living with anger, frustration. And we are in a time that none of us have lived through before. Several of us were talking recently about how we're living in our modern day Kent state in the 1960s when there were people shot and killed on a college campus in the 1960s as a result of the Vietnam War protests. We're in uncharted territory, and I have asked that our chief of police come and talk a bit about our practices a little bit later this evening after we have a chance to have public comment on items that are not on the agenda. But I just wanted to say how our heart is broken here in Missoula, and that our heart is with Minneapolis, Minnesota, and those residents and the community this evening, and across communities across the country. And it seems almost trite to move on to agenda items, and I apologize for that. This is a business meeting of the City Council. I'm going to have to do that. But I did not want to start out our meeting without acknowledging the heartbreak that many people are feeling in this country right now. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move through a couple of business items before we get to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. So we have minutes from January 12th of 2026. Do any council members have any questions or changes to those minutes? All right. I'm not seeing any, so those minutes will remain as submitted on record. Thank you. Ms. Trimble, we have our committee meetings this coming Wednesday, January 28th. Are there any updates or changes to the committee schedule?
There are not updates or changes at this time. However, the committee schedule is built in, anticipating that we might need to continue agenda items from today's meeting into it on Wednesday. So to be determined what the exact topics will be on Wednesday.
Great. I'm sure you and your team will will keep that committee schedule updated online in real time as the agenda items are clarified after tonight's meeting.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have special presentations and proclamations. We don't have any neighborhood council updates. We do have a proclamation of We the People Amendment Day. And so Claire's going to share that online. I am going to find that in my, on my agenda here. Okay. See that there? Great. Okay. Whereas on November 8th, 2011, 74.67% of Missoula voters passed referendum 7653, urging our state and federal elected officials to amend the United States Constitution to state that corporations are not human beings. And whereas on November 6th, 2012, 74.9% of Montana voters passed Initiative 166, asserting that the people of Montana regard money as property, not speech, and that the people of Montana regard the rights under the United States Constitution as rights of human beings, not rights of corporations, and called for a United States constitutional amendment. And whereas the well-being of Missoula citizens is harmed with each pressing year that the constitutional amendment is delayed, as our common good and our common wealth is being redirected to benefit the few. And whereas the money that is overwhelming our elections and intimidating our candidates and elected officials makes it more and more difficult for the citizens of Missoula to protect the common good and our common wealth. And whereas Missoula wishes to give evidence of our commitment every year until the United States Constitution is amended to say that corporations are not people and money is not speech, and the proposed We the People Amendment most clearly states our intent. Now, therefore, I, Andrea Davis, Mayor of the City of Missoula in the state of Montana, do hereby proclaim January 26th, 2026 as We the People Amendment Day in Missoula, Montana, to reaffirm our shared commitment. And I do have somebody that has asked to speak to this evening. Please come on up. I'll turn the microphone on for you. Come on up. Please get cozy with that microphone. You can move that microphone closer to you. All right.
My biggest obstacle. So, how is this?
That's great.
Okay, great. Uh-oh, I can see myself. Posture.
You look great.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Davis, for your proclamation of We the People Amendment Day. Imagine where we would be today if Congress had immediately passed that amendment. And before I begin, would the people who support Mayor Davis's proclamation please stand? Good to see you.
Thank you.
Since the 2010 U.S. Supreme Court Citizens United decision, it is so important to take every step we can to elevate the call for the U.S. constitutional amendment. Why? Because it's here at home that national issues become personal, as we all realize. Local issues of towns across the nation are hit by the policies that money and corporations have imposed. Housing, ag land, our right to find our own solutions, I could go on. They're all affected. Standing in support today, as you all did, demonstrates that we Missoulians know the kind of headwinds that we face as we struggle to balance the pressing needs of our community. Nevertheless, we proclaim that we will move forward together. After all, the proclamation began under Mayor Engen, who fought tooth and nail and won the battle to rescue our water company from the global private equity company, Carlyle Group. With that example before us, we can go forward. Yes, we know there's been 150 years of a campaign by corporations and millionaires. Their goal? Avoid regulation at all cost, and at any cost to the common good. The result? An 80 billion bonanza over the last 50 years by using tax policies to transfer the wealth of working people. This continues to impact our community today. And listen to this, siphoning off working people's wealth not only places more people at risk for losing their housing, it also causes a decline in the funding of Social Security. And if Congress doesn't stop them from, if they don't stop Congress from taxing the wealthy to make up for it, retired people will have even more risk of losing their homes, placing more financial stress on their families. Meanwhile, billionaires and their families view our elections as an opportunity for investment, confident of high returns from more tax bonuses. We saw the result in the 2024 election. Their political spending made Montanans endure the highest per voter saturation of political spending in the whole history of our nation. But we also know of our grandparents' victory over the Copper King oligarchs and their corporations. After decades of struggle, they used the Citizens Initiative process to pass the Montana Corrupt Practices Act, which limited money and kept corporations out of our elections. What did our grandparents gain from investing their blood, sweat, and tears? It was 100 years of protected elections that had the power to control monopoly corporations and preserve our future. And today we have our own progress to report. First, the 2025 Montana legislature came close to passing bipartisan resolutions that can defy our present-day oligarchs by calling on Congress to pass the U.S. constitutional amendment. The House resolution won a unanimous voting committee and reached 50-50 on one of the House floor votes. The Senate resolution was only 3 votes short of passing. Second, Montana is now fighting corporate political spending in a whole new way by using a citizens' initiative again to change Montana corporate charters and specify that corporations would no longer have the power to spend in elections, and that's based on unbroken case law. The transparent election initiative called the Montana Plan is giving new hope to all Montanans and is capturing the attention of the whole nation. Now is the time to go to the initiative's website and give them your name so the initiative's team can reach you when signature gathering is ready to launch. Online, just search the Montana Plan. Throughout our history, we have protected our beloved state on behalf of our children. This proclamation builds on that legacy and plans to carry that spirit forward. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sue. Sue, before you go. That's Sue Kirchmeyer for the record. Sue Kirchmeyer, Ms. Trimble for the record. Thank you very much. Appreciate you sharing all of that history, context, and information with us, and appreciate folks coming down for that proclamation this evening. So we'll move on to public comment for items that are not on the agenda. The first period of public comment on items not on the agenda is limited to 20 minutes total, with up to 3 minutes allotted per speaker. Each person may speak once per meeting concerning items that are not on the agenda. In-person comments take precedence. Sign-up is required and follows a first-come, first-served basis. The second period of public comment on items not on the agenda will follow immediately after the conclusion of all regular business and continue until comments have been taken.
Sorry, Mayor, real quick, before everyone leaves, is it at all possible for them to provide a comment about the proclamation? Because that's why they were here, and I think they thought they were going to be able to speak to that separate from our agenda item. Like
No, that's why I coordinated with Sue ahead of time. There was not that was the intent, is that there would be a speaker representing
I don't
the
think they-
proclamation this evening.
I don't think they realized that, and I told them all to stick around and provide comment. So
You recommended 20-something people to speak on the proclamation?
4 of them came up to me, and I said, stick around and provide comment.
Okay. Well, I'm certain
sorry.
that we could certainly hear from another 1 or 2, but it looks like folks have headed out. Also, Sue did provide the full 5-minute allotted time, but if there's of folks that want to comment, another comment or 2, happy to hear you. Otherwise, okay, all right. Thanks for coming down this evening. Appreciate that. Thank you. And folks that are in the hallway, there's plenty of open seats if you want to come in. Plenty of open seats. Okay. And before we move on, and also we're moving into our public comment on items not on the agenda. If there's anybody that wanted to speak to the proclamation during this time period, we'll have plenty of time. Only one person has signed up for this time period, so I'll mention that if anybody else wants to speak to that proclamation this evening. Okay. The only person we have signed up is Vicki Watson. Vicki Watson, come on up.
Mayor and council, just going to make another quick comment about the artificial turf issue in the ballpark. We've been continuing to do more and more research on the possible chemicals released from those, from the various kinds of materials that are used, both the cushioning materials as well as the turf itself. And the more research we do, the more we find out that this is just a moving target, that whenever information comes out to show that a particular chemical is being released and is causing a hazard, is causing water pollution problems and so on, then the response is, oh, well, we'll get rid of that chemical, we'll use a different chemical. And the new chemicals are just not as well studied yet. So I made a few notes that the tire crumb that used to be used for cushioning the replacement is called EnviroFill. But that also included acrylic polymers and a fungicide called triclosan, which multiple studies have shown to cause a variety of negative impacts to aquatic life. But now the manufacturer of EnviroFill says, no, we're no longer using triclosan. They have something new called Microban. It's another fungicide. Well, funguses are really tough organisms, and fungicides are really toxic materials for the most part, and they almost always are released from the materials they're applied to eventually. So the constant new chemicals in use in these products, they're not necessarily better, they're just less well studied. Once they have been used for a while and are more studied, the next thing we know, they're just as bad or worse than whatever they replaced. And this is a particularly bad time to volunteer to be a guinea pig and put the new materials out in our parks, because right now the federal government is really reducing the requirements of testing for a lot of new materials. They don't get the level of testing that they formerly did before they get approved for use. So not a good time to try out new materials. So that's why we'd like to stick with good old natural grass. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this evening. All right, thank you for your comments this evening. Anybody else? We do have additional time during this initial public comment for items that are not on the agenda. If anybody else is wishing to make public comment for items that are not on the agenda.
Hi, my name's Katie Thompson, and I just wanted to make a comment on the Midtown Commons proposal, and I'm sorry, I will keep showing up, just begging for a much larger park with consideration of what size of development is going to go in that area, and also in consideration of this new zoning that's going to go in with the increased population. I just am begging you guys to give adequate green space, as well as I think I've kind of caught wind. I'm sorry, haven't found time to watch all of the meetings on the proposed zoning, but I've heard that it's being proposed that the green space is less, and I just am dying for the people that are going to live there with animals and kids. And also I just went to the movie theater where they had a documentary on bees, and we're losing all of these little pockets of our pollinators, and they need it. So I'm just begging you guys that if those amendments are going to be considered tonight, that you will not be taking away the minimal green space that these developers are that we're going to be infilling here. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. Thanks for your comments this evening. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I know I allowed some applause at the beginning of the meeting. It was exciting, but we don't applause after every public comment. And I'm gonna ask for you to refrain. Thank you. I appreciate your enthusiasm so much. But it is something that we don't like to see happen in council chambers, partly because we want to welcome comments of a diversity, and if folks get applauses and some get boos, well, that wouldn't make it very safe for folks to comment. So thank you so much for refraining. I appreciate that. All right. Anybody else for public comment on items that are not on the agenda this evening? Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Gwen Hoppy. I live in the riverfront. And my topic is communication between the city and the residents. And I know the city's trying really hard. You have Engage Missoula, there's Missoulian. They used to be 7 days a week, now they're 3. But I just wonder if there's something else we could do to connect the residents with what's going on, what's about to go on. I know some of you have, maybe you're on Facebook or something and you get a little information out there, but sometimes I wish our council people could come back and knock on doors after the election with conversations on what's going on, what's coming up. And I'm kind of involved. I pay attention to some of it, not all of it. But there's probably a lot of people who don't have an easy way to engage. And I don't know the answer, but I'm just putting it out there to think about some way to let residents know more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy. Thanks for your comments. Anybody else for public comment on items that are not on the agenda? We have some extra time.
Hello, I'm Carrie Schreiber from Southgate Triangle. Was taken by that proclamation earlier in the explanation that for a long time we've been following corporate interests, and the trend is to, I'm paraphrasing, avoid any regulation that limits corporate objectives, even at the cost of the common good of the people. And I'm hoping that you all consider that in the choices that you're making through this land use plan and in these specific developments like the city-owned property that'll become Midtown Commons. When we're talking about reducing landscaping, we know that affects like flooding and runoff, that affects, to have that permeable surface is really, really important. We have all the science that backs that up. To limit that in order to maximize profits doesn't feel like we're following the needs of the public. Same thing with reducing activity spaces and apartment build-outs. And those of you that are making this decision, please think about it as though you were living in these places. I don't know that Portland or Fort Collins, that had some of the same zoning designers as who's been working on our project here. I don't know that either of those cities has had housing become more affordable, even though they've had gigantic population booms. Activity spaces and landscaping are really important for all sorts of environmental issues and for the common good of the people living there, as well as for the bees. And yeah, in our Midtown Commons area, I've got at least 6 different species of pollinators, and we're looking at cutting down every single tree and destroying all the riparian area around there. I don't understand how these objectives fit with our established policy and our established priorities. And I just ask that you keep these sort of things in mind when you're looking towards passing the land, not the land use, but the UDC. And even if we have a lot of people from building nonprofit groups, they're still from development groups, even though they're nonprofit groups. Please consider the well-being of the people that'll be living in these developments.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiber. Any other members of the public wanting to make comment on items that are not on the agenda? I'm not seeing anybody in the audience, so I'm going to just take a gander online here. All right, I don't see anybody online either. That means that we have folks here for our agenda item this evening, which our public hearing is dedicated to our Unified Development Code. Before we get there, however, thank you to Council for allowing me to make Mayor's comments at the beginning of the meeting. And I want to start by saying that the city of Missoula values our constitutional rights, and we uphold due process for everyone. The Missoula Police Department does not have a role in immigration status, and the city's police authority is in enforcement of city and state laws. Missoula police officers do not ask immigration status when interacting with the public, for instance, during traffic stops. And as always, the Missoula Police Department prioritizes public safety for all of our residents and our visitors. I want to speak a bit to what I have done in my administration has done for the better part of a year, when President Donald Trump issued his executive order regarding immigration enforcement a year ago. We had a number of community members concerned with what this meant for folks living and working in Missoula. So I convened a meeting with city and county attorneys, Sheriff's Department, Missoula Police Department, immigration attorneys, nonprofits like Soft Landing Missoula, and the International Rescue Committee. We had the opportunity to, first of all, get to know one another and answer questions, ask questions and answer questions. It was important to understand what folks in the community that might be fearful for being targeted by this federal executive order and law, what that might mean. Some people that did not grow up in this country, but that lived here legally with certain immigration status may not understand how to act or behave during traffic stops, for example. So it was an opportunity to answer some questions and get to know one another and open up a dialogue. That was in January. And then we had a follow-up. We've had 2 of those roundtable conversations since. And I think one of the things that was very helpful for me as the mayor of Missoula and how to decide how to lead this conversation and how to take a public stance on the approach to what's happening with the federal deployment of military in some cases to our states and in others, and ICE enforcement and customs enforcement. We did take direction from these experts that we met with, and it was really for us to not draw unnecessary attention to where there was not really an issue happening in Missoula. And so we were able to build trust amongst one another, and there is no known to this day, and there hasn't been known ICE activity in Missoula. However, the violence is escalating. The violence is escalating across the country, and in particular in Minnesota, with 2 deaths. And it does make it incumbent on me as your mayor to address this evening. I want to repeat that the city of Missoula values our constitutional rights, and we uphold due process for everyone. As always, the Missoula Police Department prioritizes public safety for all residents and visitors. I have asked our police chief, Mike Collier, to talk about the Missoula Police Department's approach to help answer questions related to immigration enforcement. And I want to say that I am very proud of our Missoula Police Department's ethical standards, and I'm very glad to have Chief Collier here to speak to that. And so, Chief Collier, if I could ask you to come on up and share a few words this evening, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Davis and council members, for giving me the opportunity to speak to you and to our community about this concern around immigration enforcement. As a matter of record, my name is Michael Collier, and I am the police chief. I kind of organized my thoughts, I guess, from the highest level down, so to speak, and starting with concerns I have at kind of the big picture view. I then will speak a little bit about what we're doing locally here, and then wrap up with offering some things for people to consider in their day-to-day interactions here in Missoula. So, from the very highest level, I am concerned that when any group is viewed as being untrustworthy, that every member of that group, regardless of where they work, is kind of lumped into that kind of same stereotype. So for when people see, ICE agents or any other agency acting in a way that they don't approve of and that causes them to not have trust in law enforcement, I'm very concerned that that splashes upon our relationship with our community here. And so to try to get to the bottom of what we stand for and what we're doing here, I'll speak about what we're doing locally, internally, and describe to you that we do not do business in that manner. So, what I'm talking about is people see federal agents, presumably federal agents, jumping out of unmarked vehicles, wearing uniforms or equipment that does not identify them as an agency, does not identify them as any person by name, and then furthermore has their identity covered with some type of face covering or mask. All of those things are prohibited by the Missoula Police Department. So we have strict policy in place about all of this. You can cover your face in an official capacity under basically two circumstances, like the COVID pandemic to protect yourself, or in an extreme weather event, to keep you from getting frostbite while you're doing your job out there. But in either of those circumstances, if somebody asks for you to remove that face covering so you can be identified, they are required to do so. So that's out of play. Identifying us by name, our policy requires that our name be on the outermost garment. You can see I'm in compliance here with policy with my name tag today. If I have a jacket on, it needs to be on that jacket to make it clear who we are. If you are asked by a member of the community to identify yourself, you're required to do so. We do have unmarked cars. We use them sparingly. They're largely administrative cars or detective cars. Unless it's unavoidable, we don't use those in an enforcement capacity. It is very important for us to be clearly identifiable as an agency when we're doing any type of enforcement and as a person or a community member, from a trust level. So, for example, if you've ever seen us do a controlled operation, particularly one that is higher risk, frankly, we make a bit of a spectacle of it, and that is on purpose. So what we will commonly do is block the street at both ends with marked patrol cars. We'll activate a siren to draw attention that we are present. We'll use a public address system to identify us as the Missoula Police Department and to give commands. We will have uniforms present. We'll have other marked cars present. If somebody's not in a traditional patrol uniform, if they're in some type of a special team uniform, those are clearly marked as being police with their name on them, and they do not wear any type of covering across their face. The exception, I guess, could be like the use of a chemical agent or something like that. But to operate with a veil of secrecy just provides confusion and speculation. It impacts trust. It is not good for anybody. It is not good for us and our safety if people don't know that we're the police. It's not good for the community members if they don't know that we are the police. So I want to reassure people in Missoula that when you see those type of tactics being used, that we don't do those in Missoula. And I can't speak to their training and their protocol or how they think that furthers their mission. I will just tell you it's not the way we do business here. Moving on to the next part of the conversation that has been presented to me, and I've done a little bit of research on it, but there seems to be concern about the lack of training and professionalism of ICE agents that are enforcing immigration status. I've read everything from 6 to 8 weeks to 20 weeks or whatever. I don't know where the truth lies in that, but if they are getting 6 to 8 weeks of training before doing this type of work, I will describe to you that new police officer at the Missoula Police Department has at least 35 weeks of training and close supervision, at least up through their probationary year, their initial year of employment, and then further training and supervision immediately or throughout their career after that. Our officers get in-service training every month, and that is on a variety of topics. To this point tonight, I will tell you, we've taken those opportunities to talk about things like civil administrative warrants and criminal warrants. And I got copies of those from our friends in the meetings that the mayor talked about earlier, and I brought those to the training and used them examples, and I showed them to our people. This is a ICE civil administrative warrant. This is what they look like, and this is a federal arrest warrant, and there's no comparing them. I mean, I should say there's no confusing them. They are very different. And I made it clear to our people that we do not have a role in a civil administrative warrant signed by an ICE agent. If it is an arrest warrant signed by a federal judge, that is our lane. That is a criminal law enforcement lane. And so we train our people extensively on all topics. We are staying current on this ever-changing situation on this topic in the manner that I kind of just described to you, with explaining to them our role between civil and criminal enforcement. And finally, really, our mission here, as the mayor said, our mission is to support state and local law. And I'm sorry, to enforce state and local law and to protect and serve our community. There are certain federal statutes that we have authority to investigate. Title 21 is the federal drug statute. And so when we have investigators who are assigned to multi-agency drug task force, they can be deputized to enforce federal drug laws. Title 8 is the U.S. code related to immigration. We have 0 officers deputized to enforce Title 8 immigration status. We have never had a role in that in my career. We don't have a role in that today, and I don't expect we will have a role in that in the future. Our mission is to support, protect, and defend the United States Constitution, to support, protect, and defend the Montana Constitution, and enforce our state and local laws. The last thing is I'll say that there are a couple of things I would ask people to consider locally. If you take exception to the way immigration enforcement is done, you absolutely have the freedom of speech to peacefully protest. And again, we will support, protect, and defend that individual right. There's been a number of protests and rallies throughout Missoula, over the years, and we've developed a really successful formula in managing that. We manage it to protect public safety and to ensure that everybody's individual rights are maintained, and to protect property and maintain the peace. And we have rinsed and repeated that formula over the years with a number of different protests, and it's been highly successful. And then we plan on doing that in the future to ensure that anybody locally that wants to express their First Amendment rights may peacefully do that through their freedom of speech. And last thing I'll say very specifically is, if you are encountered by somebody that you don't reasonably believe to be a police officer doing a legitimate law enforcement function, call 911. So I just described to you how we do business, right? We don't wear masks. We don't run around concealing our names and our agencies and our vehicles. And if you're presented in that situation and you are uncomfortable with what is going on, I would encourage our community members to call 911. We will process that as an in-progress call for service. And we are the local law enforcement that you can trust. We are the good guys, and we will respond, and we will protect public safety. We will protect everybody's rights. We will protect property and maintain the peace. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that to the group. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Chief Collier. I very much appreciate that. Thank you for coming down and sharing your time with me this evening. And I want to emphasize again that our commitment to upholding the constitutional aspects of what we talked about tonight, the United States, the state of Montana, are at the forefront. We will continue to do our job here locally to do that. And I do want to mention that we'll continue to do things like the trainings and continue to keep the peace when folks do wish to assemble, when folks do wish to share freedom of speech. I really appreciate you, Chief Collier, going through that this evening. We haven't shared our practices on our City of Missoula website. There is an example from the Helena Police Department. We've taken a look at that. And Councilor Jordan, you just shared that again with us. And that is something I think we could absolutely, and are taking a look at putting up. It's a very easy thing for us to do that. And so we will continue to share what these practices are. It's our commitment to maintain accountability and transparency. And And so that we will do. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity, in particular with what's been going on in Minneapolis in particular, that we had this time tonight. Thank you for allowing me to adjust our agenda this evening for that. And very much appreciate you, Chief Collier, coming down, your leadership and that of your officers in the department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Good night.
Appreciate it. You too. Thank you. Okay. All righty. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. We do have a public hearing and a kind of big juicy one this evening, and that is our Unified Development Code. So, before we get started with this, I just want to mention a little bit of the process. We had our initial public hearing a couple weeks back. Heard from a number of you. It was really helpful to hear your comments. These two motions are on the floor, have been on the floor. There's been 2 consecutive land use and planning committee meetings where council has done a substantive amount of work to provide amendments and talk through those things. And land use and planning chair Nugent will give a brief update on how we're going to handle the public comment process and speak to an issue prior to us hearing public comment on these 2 motions. Now, Councilor Nugent.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Quickly before I speak to process, I did want to put one clarification out there based on a lot of emails we've been receiving. I think the coverage of some of this process has given a little bit of a false overview of what we've done as far as walkability goes. So I want to make clear that nothing council has done has waived sidewalk requirements on any street or street tree requirements whatsoever. The amendment that was covered in the article last week that referenced walkability was actually about how buildings are placed on a parcel, and that conversation included how that can impact the pedestrian environment, but it did not eliminate any sidewalks coming to those parcels or on the street, and there's still boulevard requirements and street tree requirements. So I wanted to stress that, and of course, people are welcome to give public comment saying that we're right or wrong or indifferent, but I want to make sure that that is accurate there. And I think that more than anything, the headline and the photo might have misled, because Greenfield or like a subdivision requirement would absolutely have sidewalks, and the photo was of a subdivision in the middle of the field. So I think that it misled what the conversation was. Mayor Davis, without objection, I would recommend that we handle public comment the way we've been doing it in land use and planning the last 2 weeks, and the way the planning board handled it as well, which is to just open public comment to everybody in the room who wants to comment on this topic. And then when that is done, we'll just continue working. If we get to a point where we're going to vote tonight, which I see is highly unlikely, we would take another round of public comment before a final vote. Otherwise, we'd refer it back to land use and planning for another several hours of work this Wednesday.
That sounds like a great plan to me. Any objection from council members? Okay. All right, then we will start immediately with opportunities for the public to comment on this agenda item. So comments are 3 minutes or less per person. Please say your name for the record. I'll help you track your time with this machine up here. And whoever is ready to share comment, please come on up to the microphone. Come on up to the podium. Come on up.
Well, I am Bruce Baxter. Again, I'm going to ask the council to consider the zoning of East Missoula. The city staff has initially designated the place type of the core of East Missoula as urban residential high, UR3. I quote the city staff here. The staff created a methodology using proximity of amenity and services. East Missoula is 3 or more miles away from a school, grocery store, a continuous sidewalk, commuter trail, bike lane, or any city amenities. The large neighborhood of the core of East Missoula is completely infilled with 4 or less residential units per acre. The core is surrounded by 4 neighborhoods, all assigned low urban residential. We have now heard that the Ben Hughes Easy Street addition to the west of us is recommended as LUR1. Changing East Missoula to UR3 created a mismatch with surrounding neighborhoods and would reduce consistency across the neighborhood. The core of East Missoula does not meet assessment criteria of UR3. Staff suggests, and I quote again, keeping the integrity of the place type at front of mind. We would not simply issue UR3 without ensuring the corresponding infrastructure was in place. If parcel does not meet assessment criteria assigned to UR2, staff's suggestion would be to update the place type map as well to the place type that corresponds, end quote. I ask the council to follow staff's methodology and amend the land use plan to change the place type of the core of East Missoula to limited urban residential and the place type map to LUR2 to match the actual land use and match with the surrounding neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Thanks for coming down this evening. Anyone else? Public comment on this agenda item?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Derek Goldman, Ward 4. This process has been going on for several years now. It's been a really long process, and I thank all of you and I thank the staff for all the work that's been going on. Quite a few amendments have been coming in seemingly at the 11th hour, and some of them make fairly significant changes to what has been presented to the public over the last year or more of meetings out in the neighborhoods or open houses, and some of them even seem to contradict some of the stated goals and values in the draft documents. One of these is an amendment to increase maximum height limits by nearly 30% in UR3. That is quite a significant increase in what is already going to be a drastic height increase in residential neighborhoods to be coming this late in the process. Another important one that is making major changes that's coming late here is access to outdoor green space, natural areas, and vegetation on site. This amendment would further weaken already minimal site requirements for green space and natural areas. Some have suggested, well, people can go to their neighborhood parks. True, but parks don't serve the same purpose as on-site green space. People have dogs, people have small children who, for safety, health, and convenience, need outdoor green space where they live. And green space can also help absorb runoff, provide cooling during our hot days, and provide space for pollinators and for residents to grow their own food on site where they live. So these amendments, combined with the one that lifted the floor area ratio cap in some cases, are really making significant changes, I feel, in a negative direction to what was presented to us over the course of the last year, and subordinating some of the other community values articulated in the draft documents. I'll close by echoing outgoing words of warning from former council member Heidi West, who, even as a longtime affordable housing advocate herself, cautioned that such a laser focused on housing could create a risk that other vital Missoula values that contribute to the quality of life and well-being in our community get subordinated or thrown under the bus. And I'm concerned that some of that could be happening through the amendment process. So I would urge you to oppose those amendments that I referenced. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. All right. Next public comment. Come on up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Abby Huseth. I am the Deputy Director with Climate Smart Missoula. And we also just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and staff as well over the last few years, and your time and your careful consideration of this UDC over in this final stretch. We've been part of this process since the beginning, along with so many others, and we do support overall adoption and have a few key comments related to upcoming Chapter 4.9 site development discussion and the proposed amendments. In short, we support keeping the staff recommendations as written in the adoption draft for landscaping, activity areas, and the cash in lieu provisions. We understand some concessions and changes have already been made that may reduce housing density somewhat compared to the original adoption draft, spot zoning, reducing building heights, etc. However, I think even with these amendments, this UDC is a great improvement on housing from current Title 20. And it's also possible that these direct housing density concessions could be revisited in phase 2 updates as we see how projects play out on the ground. But our green infrastructure is not an optional piece of our community's development puzzle that can be compromised away. Study after study has demonstrated the overwhelming social benefits of access to close to home green space, not to mention the climate benefits, and has been shown in other cities it's much harder and more expensive to turn pavement and cement back into green spaces. And a lot of communities are doing that right now. And we need tools to ensure that our parks can handle increased use with increased density. The adoption draft already reduces baseline landscaping from what's currently required in Title 20. And some of this makes sense given the climate and affordability benefits of our community's shift to a more compact development patterns and the need for flexibility to support infill development. We think the adoption draft is the right balance on these issues, and proposed council amendments would further reduce landscaping or activity areas, and this, from what we understand, would not appreciably affect the number of units that could be built, but it would reduce tree cover and green space. So taking a step back, there were so many important values that came to the fore as part of this Our Missoula process since the beginning. It isn't just a housing plan, it really represents our vision for a thriving Missoula for years to come. Over our 10 years of working on local climate issues at Climate Smart Missoula, one key fact informs how we understand where our community needs to go. And that's that the next 10 or 20 years will not look like the last 10 or 20. Climate impacts are like extreme heat, are here and will intensify. And with this UDC, we have an opportunity today to address climate, housing, and equity together. Thank you all.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Chris Chitty, and I live in the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood. So when we use the term activity areas, I think we tend to, and I mean when we use this term in the media, when we use it in discussion, when we're talking to our neighbors, we tend to envision these sort of beautiful, shady, landscaped oases that are ripped from the pages of Better Homes and Gardens. I'm here to tell you that that's not what we're actually talking about when we're talking about activity areas. That's not what we're going to see from these rules. We will see what we have seen in the past, which is neglected lawns in awkward places put there, not because that is what the residents want, but because that is the easiest way to comply with a rule. What we are talking about is a mandate to build the world's crappiest lawns. We are forcing developers to trade needed housing for unwanted lawns. It is also important to understand that we're not just talking about 1 or 2 apartments lost. These are the kind of requirements that work together to move projects from feasible to infeasible. Whether or not it makes sense for a developer to risk a lot of time and money balances on a fine edge, and losing lot area is one of the biggest contributors to dead projects. Whether it be from parking mandates or setbacks or activity areas. We should not force developers to build yards that residents don't value. Now, I would love to see us as a community invest significantly in our shared public spaces, and that requires resources. The very best way we can do that is to ensure that enough people live close enough to our parks and trails that we can support with our tax dollars the maintenance and improvements that we want to see. Mandating unwanted lawns makes that task all that much harder. The amendment at hand is a reasonable compromise between what the planning board passed and what staff would like to see. And I urge you to pass it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chitty. Other public comment, come on up.
Hi, I am Kate Dinsmore. I'm a landscape architect with WGM Group here in Missoula. I am requesting that you adopt the landscaping changes as recommended by the planning board. These changes or recommendations are intended to provide flexibility and predictability. Landscaping is important, but it is also difficult to regulate because it's hard for one set of regulations to appropriately address every project. However, more flexibility for apartments and mixed-use projects is needed. I'm also concerned about the variance process not having enough flexibility. The way it's written currently, and it's also part of state law, is that the owner has to show there's a hardship to get a variance, which is really difficult to prove that, making it difficult for staff to have that flexibility that may be needed to approve some of these projects. And while some have voiced their concern about a reduction in trees, I want to point out that in Title 20, street trees count towards your general landscaping requirements. And the new zoning, street trees do not count toward general landscaping, so more on-site trees will be required. I also want to clarify that landscaping requirements and zoning are for the property only and not the right-of-way. The property line typically sits at the back of the sidewalk, and the public space with the sidewalk, boulevard, and street trees is not affected by the zoning, and will still be required for projects to maintain desirable streets. And also want to clarify that activity area and city park are not the same thing. Any changes to the landscaping have no effect on public parks. And I think we have to be really aware that if activity area makes apartments and mixed-use projects too difficult, we won't have housing units or activity area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dinsmore. All right, next public comment. Come on up.
Good evening, folks.
You can adjust that, Danny, if that makes it easier on your back there. There you go.
Mayor. Good evening, Council. My name is Danny Tenenbaum. I'm a resident of the Lower Rattlesnake, and I'm also on Planning Board as an alternate member, but I'm speaking today just on behalf of myself. I want to echo the testimony put forward by the last two commenters about the need to adopt the Planning Board's amendment regarding landscaping and activity areas to strike a better balance between preserving our trees and our natural environment while also allowing smart forms of infill that will help reduce the housing shortage that we are currently facing here in Missoula. I could talk about policy for ages. I'm not going to. I just want to speak personally. Before my family moved into our house back in 2018, we lived in a 12-unit building kind of close to Kiwanis Park, about 2 blocks from there. And this building was constructed before Missoula had any activity area requirements. It was still a beautiful, verdant city, but back then it was just, these rules were not in place. We lived in a studio, my wife and I, during that time, and it was really helpful to have a place to rent for a while so that we could build up for a down payment so that we could finally plant roots and become homeowners in this town. And with the activity area requirement in the draft as it exists now, my fear is that that type of housing is going to be impossible to build going forward. Those projects simply will not pencil out. I don't think there's any malice in the current form of the activity area requirement. It's just designed in a way that it will not allow these projects to pencil out. And then these homes, that working families rely on, people who are trying to build up equity, build up for a down payment, they're no longer going to be able, these will no longer exist. And that sort of rung on the ladder of moving from a renter to a homeowner is going to be kicked out for people who live in Missoula. And that's really my fear. This, community that we lived in, it didn't have activity area, but it's not something we ever noticed or talked about because Kiwanis Park was 2 blocks away. That's where we went when we needed green space. There were still trees on the streets. There was never any complaints that I heard from myself or anyone else who lived there about the lack of trees or the lack of green space. And finally, I just want to sort of point out that the proposed amendment to the activity area requirement doesn't eliminate the requirement. It strikes a balance between eliminating it entirely versus having a blanket mandate across the city, which is what the current draft requires. And so I think it's a great balance that it strikes, and I hope that you pursue that further in the code reform process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tenenbaum. Come on up.
Hi, My name is Adam Cook. I'd like to take my time to echo the last three commenters in support of amendments to the landscaping and activity area regulations currently in the UDC as written. As an environmental science professional, I want to affirm that research is unequivocal. Efficient land use is the definitive factor influencing both climate resiliency and affordability. We know that fast-tracking infill development drastically reduces emissions, reduces development pressure on open space, and greatly improves housing access and equity. To fail to amend the code as written does a disservice to all of these goals, and to cast lawns and hedges as beneficial to the climate is the opposite of the truth. But the most important point is this: Missoula's residents should have the freedom to choose their own lifestyle. It is not the place of local government to tell mature, informed adults that they must live with lawns and hedges. If people want to choose without that, or to choose to live without that, if they feel that that suits their needs, they should have the freedom to do so as grown, informed adults. And it is fundamentally condescending for the city to tell people that that they may not do so. When people want to build beautiful spaces, they want to live in nice settings, they want to do everything they can to build beautiful housing, and they will when they can afford to do so. So I think that we should put ourselves on track to do that and improve our climate resiliency and affordability simultaneously. And I encourage you to pass these amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. All right, next public comment.
Good evening, Eli Harmon, East Missoula resident. I actually had a couple comments tonight now, and one is generating from some of the things we've heard earlier today, this evening, and relative to the proclamation and the position that we've been trying to maintain about corporations not being people, because it's big money. Well, I just hope that even though it's on a smaller scale, I think the concept applies with the developers coming into our valley. They shouldn't be influencing how our valley should be developed. That should be addressed by the people, the local residents, the ones that are going to be impacted by the grounds and lands to be developed. So I just think that that needs to be kept in mind, that all these big developers, they're the big money too. And even though it's not a political arena or elections, it's still the same concept of trying to influence the way things are done, the way things should be mapped out, the way things should be zoned, etc. Then the other thing, mainly I want to comment with the UDC, is clearly something needs to be done, as you guys have been working for years now on that. Growth is going to happen across our whole valley, but I think specific for East Missoula, I'll just comment like others already had, that really needs to be changed from high density down to LUR2 to fit what East Missoula is, the infrastructure and everything. You guys have heard it over and over from all of us that actually live out there and will be directly affected by it. But I hope that, like the council, I mean, can't necessarily speak for, say, the people who've been born and raised here, because they may or may not know the difference. But I bet you just about everybody else who have moved here over the decades, even in the last weeks, one of probably a handful of the reasons they did was to leave the big cities, leave the congestion, leave the traffic jams, leave all that. And if we overdevelop this valley, we're going to be the same way. So, and we've heard also in other previous meetings how well this plan has worked in other areas, and I'm sure it has. And not that it won't necessarily in Missoula, but let's bear in mind, those are large metropolis areas, 500,000 to 1 million people. Missoula City, even the county, doesn't even have 100,000 people, or if it does, just that. This valley isn't going to be a large metropolis. Let's not overbuild it. Let's keep why everybody moved to this valley and why they've moved to Montana isn't to move back to a big congested city. And lastly, I'd like to comment that the concept of, well, with all this extra tighter building, families can live closer, friends can live closer. Again, that works for a big cities. Great, because it takes an hour and a half to get across some of those cities. Missoula, it doesn't. It takes 20 minutes. Everybody who wants to go see a friend can drive 20 minutes, can walk 10 minutes. Let's just keep those scenarios in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Harmon.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Davis. I'm Len Broberg, B-R-O-B-E-R-G, from Common Good, Missoula. Pleasure to be here to comment again tonight, specifically directed at the issue of landscaping. Our membership feels pretty strongly that the staff recommendation landscaping is appropriate and strikes the right balance. I think you all received an email or a letter with details that wanted to share with you all, so I'll keep this shorter, focus on a couple things. First, private land needs to contribute to dealing with stormwater. It's happening. The park across from my house, Takima Kokaski Park, has now been converted to a stormwater storage area. That's public space. It's being used to deal with stormwater. If private land does not deal with stormwater, more of our public spaces will be changed to deal with stormwater. And it'll just be where we can do it. And I understand that project and I support it, but my kids used to sled on that hill. Can't sled there anymore. Won't be possible with the improvements that are put in there. It'll still be nice, I think, but we'll see, hopefully. But it does need to be there to deal with stormwater from a lightly developed area. And that benefits not me so much, but people down the hill from me, which is really part of being a neighbor in Missoula, is contributing to the well-being of everybody. Second, eliminating parking dealt with the problem of using up too much land. The example you saw in the Land Use Planning Committee, essentially they were saying, well, we had to provide a parking space, we had to provide room for the cars, and then we had to narrow down the driveway. Well, they got to put in everything they wanted to put in. There was no mention of a unit lost there. In fact, if you find in an application that an affordable unit will be lost, then provide for a chance to waive the landscaping. The planning board amendment, I'm sorry, I read it, I don't see anything enforceable there. I don't understand how staff is supposed to determine when they are supposed to give flexibility, when they are not, etc. It's really difficult to see how that's going to deal with the issues appropriately. So finally, I hope that you decide to stick with the staff amendment. I'm a little scared about crappy lawns being the target here amongst the development community, but I hope that we're aiming higher and we can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broberg. Next public comment, come on up.
Better this time?
That's perfect.
My name is Linda Ensign. I live in East Missoula, and my property shares a boundary with the proposed Aspire subdivision. My neighbors and I have spoken ad nauseum about the unsustainable traffic, the unsuitable transit systems, and the lack of connectivity. So today, I would like to try to make you more familiar with the land itself, something most of you, including staff, have probably never seen. Although I have heard it described in this chamber as mostly flat, really it isn't. At our shared boundary, there is a steep embankment with a significant depression at the base of the embankment, rising to slope slowly to the river. All of East Missoula from Highway 200 slopes to the river, more gradually near the highway, but steeply from Speedway to the embankment, which runs the entire length of the Aspire property. This is significant because, as one of our many deficits, East Missoula has no storm drains, and the water from snowmelts and rainstorms run down that slope. I know because Robinson Street and my driveway turn into stream beds an inch or two deep during these events. I dig trenches at the end of my driveway to divert the water away from my garage. Some of this water eventually ends up pooled in the depressions at the base of the embankment. My friends and I ice skated there many years ago. I never thought much about the water, where the water went. It dries up in the summer until spring 2 years ago when someone drove a bulldozer into the middle of the Aspire property, followed by a big dump truck. The dump truck got stuck in the mud. It dropped in all the way to the axles, and the dozer nearly got stuck trying to get it out. The truck sat in the field for a couple of months until they brought in 2 cats to get it out, one to lift and one to pull. I think the water in that marshy depression must push the water table on that flat very high. It is on this property that zoning UR3 still stacks multi-level, multi-family units as close together as you can crowd them and still get 1 tree on each lot. I have been around for a while. I remember when homeowners in the South Hill had to install French drains because the water pushing their homes off the pads. A friend of mine, spring came up in the middle of his Whitaker Drive duplex as paving and building occurred above it, and I wonder what surprise Mother Nature has for us here. I don't believe this property should be developed as a subdivision at all, but the least you can do is reduce the burden to a more reasonable level. Please change the zoning on this property to a more appropriate LR1 or LR2.
Thank you, Ms. Ensign. Hello.
Hello, I'm Lisa Thomas, also from East Missoula, and also have been here many times and to all the other meetings. And there are 2 things. One, the community outreach events that were put in the engagement summary said they had reached 890 members for the community, and that they had held public events on River Road, Franklin and Fort, Mullen Neighborhood, Bonner Park, Maloney Ranch, Pineview Park, Westside Park, and Rose Park. There were no public events in East Missoula. Residents of East Missoula heard about this on November 11th at our East Missoula Community Council meeting when the staff came to do a presentation. Public comment closed on November 12th. We heard about it for the first time on November 11th in the evening. And we have no representative on the city council. Members, residents of East Missoula heard about this city land use. We are in the county. So most people were not aware that this project was for 20 years and that would affect their property if we are annexed a decade from now. So you can see we were caught very off guard. At the East Missoula Community Council meeting after the presentation, the staff people who gave the presentation, and I quote, said, "We knew you would be pissed." Pardon my language, but that is what was said. We were not informed of this beforehand. We were not allowed to give feedback and public comment in a timely fashion. And now you are making a decision that will affect our properties until 2045, if I am still there in 2045. I live in the Hidden Trail subdivision. It is considered a high-density neighborhood. I have my little postage stamp. I love my yard. My lawn is not crappy. It is a small yard. I have 4 trees. I sit in the back. I have 3 kinds of grass. I have all kinds of bulbs. So yes, you can give people a little plot of land and they can do a lot with it if they want to. So let's not ruin people's opportunity to garden in their own backyard, please. Secondly, the river. In the plan, the UDC, it states that, the city said one of the problems for the riparian areas is that there is no set zones. There is nothing set, and that we should be following, the city should be following the county. Aspire has a 50-foot setback. The county says for a river, you should have 100 or more feet.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson, for your comments this evening. Next public comment, come on up.
Hello, Colin Lane, MMW Architects. I am here because some of our recent public discourse has been inaccurate around landscaping and activity areas. I understand that Council will be discussing Section 4.9 this evening, specifically item number 3, which adopts with Councilor Nugent's amendment to adopt planning board's recommendations. I'm here in support of those recommendations. Those recommendations, adopting those is a vote not just for housing, but a vote to protect our trees, to protect our walkability, and to protect our ability to build urban housing. The code as written without amendment requires a suburban level of landscaping, and suburban housing is a great option that I want us to have, but I don't want it to be a mandate. The impact of having suburban landscaping and suburban apartment buildings means that we can build less housing than we can build now. And if we adopt a code that requires less housing than we're able to do now, that is a travesty. I encourage you to adopt those amendments, to protect our wildlands, allow us to build inward, allow us to build densely, and allow us to build walkability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Thanks for your comments. Come on up.
Hello, my name is Mike Robinson. I'm a developer in Missoula. I built the Hogan apartment building on 6th Street. It's a unit of 36 houses for seniors 55 and over. People say deep-pocketed developers. I'm not a deep-pocketed developer. I'm pretty shallow pockets. We have to pinch pennies pretty hard to try to get a project together. One of the things I'm very proud of the project we built on 6th Street is that our rents, we had no subsidies going into the project. It was 100% private financed. And we were able to keep rents low enough that a large portion of our residents there just get Social Security, and they're able to afford a place in our apartment building. So our rents were kept low. A big reason why we were able to do that is through density. So we have 36 units on just less than a half acre, about 40% of an acre of a lot. That density is key in order for us to make affordable units on the private market. I know subsidized housing could do something different, but private developers, that density is key. And these amendments, I think, are critical in order to do other projects in Missoula of that scale. So I speak in favor of the proposed amendment for landscaping. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Good evening. I'm Mike Morgan. I'm an architect, planner, Hoffman Morgan Associates. I think Cassie submitted a public comment exhibit that I sent to her earlier today. I also support Mike Nugent's motion about section 4.9, which is referring to Kate Desmond's letter that she spoke of earlier on landscaping. There's a couple of things in that I just want to point out that are highly important, I think. After I'm done, I'm going to give you his paper copies. You can refer to these, please. There's a couple of exhibits in there. One is activity area. If you can support, if you're within a quarter mile of a park, I think that's really good thing to add. I won't touch on activity area more than that right now. And then section 4.9.02 F and G. These are perimeter parking lot landscaping and buffering requirements. The applicability section, I suggest that you add applicability standards for parking lots consistent with section 4.9.02E, which is for interior parking lot landscaping, which exempts standards for small parking lots of 10 or less cars. That'll be really important on the infill. There's a couple of exhibits you'll see that I will give you. Lots on the infill are too small to dimensionally meet the requirements of these standards. They're okay for larger lots, but not small. So that will help. That's a simple way to fix that. And then section or table 4.7.02-10, apartment buildings, shared entrances. I suggest that you remove that design excellence requirement consistent with removal that you did for mixed use buildings. There's just too many site conditions that will limit ability to develop a small infill, say 4-unit, 6-unit building if there's this requirement in place. For example, if there's a building in the front of a lot and there's an open lot in the back, you want to parallel an alley, with 4 or 6 units, you have an end of a building facing a side street, there's no sense in putting a common shared entrance there. It'll just eliminate the ability to build a building. Lastly, there's a zoning map correction I think is really important to address. This is on Expo Parkway. It's known as Grand Creek Village. Land use plan specifies this as an urban residential high area. Currently, there's called UR2 on a portion of this land. UDC section 4.2 standards overviews states that UR1 and UR2 districts are for support smaller scale infill development. And UR3 and 4 are for larger buildings.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Morgan.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate your comments this evening. Thank you. All right, next public comment. Come on up.
Hi, my name's Katie Thompson. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I live 30 miles out of Missoula, so I will never be able to vote. We have 2 fourplexes here, and we are do-it-yourself landlords. We are probably considered small fish, but with these new codes, I have no doubt that we could probably split our property, and this would work to our advantage. But I'm here speaking because I really care about our renters. I don't think they have a lot of choice. At one of our rentals, we have a planter box. I can't tell you how many renters have been thrilled of like, oh, do I get to use that? I think these little patches of activity areas, do you really realize what you're getting rid of when you call it an activity area? It's exactly that. It is priceless to people who are stuck in apartments, who can't afford houses. I'm going to be honest, I am probably one of the haves. Like most of you, you probably have a yard, you probably have a place to let your dog out and run. So I'm actually showing up every week, not so much for myself, but because I love Missoula. And I think these areas are important. I just went to the pollinators at the Roxy. I would ask you guys to watch that. You know, when this gentleman was talking about little areas of weeds, well, I hate to say it, we probably need that. You know, we are desperately, my husband and I on our property have had bees. We haven't had them for a few years because I'll tell you what, a queen bee costs like $100. And getting a box of bees is very expensive. We have had colony collapse endlessly because we don't spray our bees. So I'm begging you to not get rid of these small spaces. We need all the green space we can. I used to live in Colorado. I flew through Denver. I am just like horrified at the stacking of people, and we can do that, but just know that what you are voting for is forever. This is what this city will be. And I get that we need growth, but we need balance. You need green spaces. We need places for pollinators. I will say this, and maybe I can have him come talk next week. One of our renters is getting his PhD at the university. He's studies butterflies. And it's pretty cool because I'll see him coming in with a bunch of butterflies that he's caught. And in talking with him, you know, the monarch's probably not going to make it. And I can have him come next week if you delay this. I'll beg him to come talk to you guys. But we need these little spaces for more reasons than one. Pets, people, renters that, I'm sorry, they don't have the most choices.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. All right, next public comment. Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Joe Lose, and I've been listening to the commentary. I just want to probably not cover anything new, but reiterate that I want to encourage us to stick with the staff recommendations for landscaping. I've heard talking about, you know, a more balanced approach, but I worry that in the more balanced approach, there's really no requirement. I mean, in that there's nothing to hold developers accountable to that. And as Abby Huseth commented, we're moving into an era of hotter climate and concern about the aquifer, concern about urban cooling and trees, all of that is going to be a serious concern. And this is a plan to go 20 years into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Come on up.
Carrie Schreiber, Southgate Triangle. Speaking out against these amendments, please stay with the staff recommendations. We do not need to be reducing landscaping or activity spaces. There are thinking errors in a lot of these arguments that, oh, people just start out in apartments and then they can work up to houses and eventually get their own lawns. And that's not accurate. Not everybody is going to be able to afford to be a homeowner at some point. We need quality of life day to day, year to year for our residents. And the environmental, social, floodplain, aquifer impacts, we won't even know those until we get a paved paradise and put up a parking lot. And we won't know what those impacts are going to be. I'm also very concerned about East Missoula and how they've been roped into this annexing without proper notice. The postcards that we received about the changing zoning came by accident, if I understand correctly from previous conversations, and hearing about the real life experience by the water, and it just seems very clear that we're moving forward without that the people being engaged or the environment really being studied. And these 11th hour amendments after years of very pro-development zoning and building code changes, to be changing these things after the public has had their input is incorrigible. It's just really frustrating to hear. So please vote against these amendments. The public has not been adequately informed. It does not fit with environmental common sense. And if developers are building crappy lawns, that's on them. But hey, it's still permeable surface, and that flooding can be a real issue. So yeah, please go against these amendments.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiber.
Hello, Gwen Hoppy again. I'll pick it back up with communication. I'd like all you council people to go back to your constituents and maybe on each block, knock on a door and tell them what their neighborhood's going to look like, what it could look like if it's maxed out. You know, if their neighbor's house burns down, they're going to rebuild, you know, how much lawn they're going to have. And things like that, because I don't know that, you know, we know what developers think. And, you know, we do want more housing, but I don't want it to be at the cost of the Missoula Cool. And we need the green spaces that we have and that the staff asked for. So I'm against the amendments that are trying to reduce any of that. I support common goods. Missoula, what they were requesting for keeping permeability, all the green space, and I also support East Missoula. I think what we should do for them is say, sorry, you're right. We didn't inform you. You didn't really get behind this. How about we keep it the lowest possible zoning, and then 10 years from now, we'll talk about it again. You might get more, you know, bigger zoning 10 years from now, but not now. Very sorry. I know my time's ticking. One very specific thing I ran across is that there's now no max amount of dwellings for UR 1, 2, and 3, which came up somewhere. And so I think I need to know more about that. I'm in 4, which is maxed out. At least you reduced from 50 to 45 feet. And let's see, the floor of Missoula, the valley, is getting most of the development, all this density. It's going to look like it's going to be living in downtown if we don't keep
a lot of these green spaces. And to truly have affordable, you need a lot more things like the Bellagio. I will say that reduced rents in Missoula. I dabble in landlording too, and I noticed that new housing, new apartments, they take a lot to build, they raise the rents. Something like Bellagio brings them down. Yes, we're going to have some more, but it's still, we need more true affordable housing. Okay, still more minutes. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy. Next public comment, come on up.
Whew. Thank you, counselors. Thank you, Mayor Davis. A really big thank you to the staff that have worked incredibly long and hard and many hours on this. I'm here, I'm Lisa Davey, D-A-B-E-Y, with Common Good Missoula. And we started this process with you over 3 years ago. And the land use plan is super clear about what direction the people of Missoula want to head on this. And you'll remember many people came to comment and say, pass this land use plan. Y'all were wearing Christmas sweaters if you were on council at the time. It was very exciting. And there's importance, right, in having that founding document that says this is how we want to put the UDC together. The everyday residents of this community value lawns, trees, and activity spaces. The people who are going to end up in lower income or higher density housing do not have a choice of whether to build a big piece or like to buy a big space and then put a house on it and get to have a lawn. This only helps people who want McMansions. We are not talking about an extra unit in an apartment building. We are talking about 450 extra square feet for a mansion. It is very clear that despite what developers and a community member who aspires to literally move up a rung, we're saying that upper rung get green space. Is that what they're saying? And a few major firms in Missoula who already have way too much power here, and a realtor who is proposing this amendment and can sell that mansion at a higher price. We do not want this amendment. We need stormwater drainage. It rained all winter here. What do you think it's going to do in 20 years? What do you think it's going to do in 2 years? We need a place for that water to go, and that is about city management. The city government literally exists to put boundaries in place for irresponsible adults. Okay? It is actually your job to help set up the regulations that keep us functioning as a community. It is about the common good and the most people and the most benefit. The land use plan talks about the indigenous population that was here. It opens with that. There's a deep importance to the idea of reciprocity in our indigenous communities.
Thank you, Ms. Davey.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Brett Boble, renter in University District with multiple housemates. Been here a couple times. Just want to remind people that I happen to live in a house that has a yard. I chose to pay more for that. It's great. A bunch of my housemates would have loved an option that was more affordable for them. So just as a renter, I want to give people that choice. No one has to do that. I think just giving people more options, I think it's a net benefit. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobo.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Snorsky, and I have also been part of this process with most of you from the beginning as well. And I just wanted to congratulate us getting here. It's been a long, hard process, and just to remind you also that this process has started because we have a shortage of housing and a median price that people can't afford, whether it's renting or owning a home. And as someone that does value real estate, and I'm looking at, I work within a 100-mile radius of Missoula and other counties as well. And younger people are not able to afford to live here. And the plan has been put in place so that we can create more options for people to actually live here in town, whether it be our own family members or people that are younger that are staying here as opposed to moving out to Superior or Deer Lodge, which is more affordable, or down in Ravalli. And that is not great for the climate either, because then they're just driving in and out. I mean, we have green space that is being developed outside of the city, and what is in our city still has plenty of green space. Whether we are allowing a little bit less of a mandated activity area for people to live in, I mean, to have where they can live, or something that's affordable for someone to rent, to own, that doesn't have time to do anything with their green space, or when they do, they'll move out of town or something. But that's what we see, and that's what we put in place with the land use plan, in hopes of getting more of different types of housing for people to choose. And I just urge you to consider that and move towards adoption of the planning board considered amendment for reducing the activity in the landscape that's required. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Norsky.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council. My name is Shibu Ahrens, Arens, and I'm with Front Step Community Land Trust, which is a permanently affordable housing provider in Missoula. Thanks to city staff and to everyone for all the work that has gone into this to this point. Through these discussions now, I'm a little worried about losing the forest for the trees, literally. In Missoula, a family on a median income can't afford a median home, and the only way out of that is by the simple law of supply and demand. We need more homes, and we know what homes people need and want. They want homes of different sizes in town and different parts of town. In town is important. When we think about where a home can be built, does Missoula value a big private lawn in town, or does it value our vulnerable open spaces outside of town that'll get bulldozed by sprawl? We need to fight sprawl and protect our open spaces. I would encourage you to support a compromise on landscaping and activity areas like what our planning board passed. I think we need more homes. I think we need them in town. And I think that'll help affordable providers like us help serve more Missoulians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ahrens.
Hi, my name is Jana Richter. I am in Ward 3. Feel excited to be here today for what was supposed to be the adoption of the Unified Development Code, but given, I think, how many little changes and tweaks that the draft is, happy to be here to be in continued conversation about why some of these amendments are so important, including reducing landscaping and eliminating activity areas, especially close to parks. I think I've been listening online at Land Use and Planning and feel moved by a lot of the passion that a lot of people have about preserving green space in and around Missoula. And I know that this is a really tough conversation around trade-offs. But I think, like has been said before me, when we look at the reality of what is happening, the reality is that, we are being overly prescriptive when we're really trying to build creative infill development, when we're trying to think about all the different needs that Missoulians have for housing. There was a comment made last week about 390 feet difference being shrubs. That's 2 bedrooms. That's almost the size of my 1-bedroom apartment. I think that's two more spaces for people to age in place on a ground when we can think about how we are building and the flexibility of what we are building. I think, I have heard several comments about, we can't be, think about how these changes will be so traumatic to our neighborhoods. And while I understand, I think we need shade trees and we want to think about permeable ground. I mean, what ends up happening is not that shade trees get planted. It's things like choke cherry trees that get planted that are more water resistant. I mean, we have to think about what is actually getting planted and what is actually happening. But I mean, I think it was aptly said by a council member last week, you know, developers, builders have been attributing our shortage to parking, to setbacks, to landscaping, to permitting. We really need to be addressing these meaningfully. And also thinking about the fact that building takes years. The thought that we are going to get, you know, 10 4 or 5 story buildings in the next year or two on the west side is just like not what is going to happen. Like it's going to take time to build our way out. And if we are sticking with the mentality of let's be overly prescriptive now and we can loosen later, we're just getting ourselves one more year into the, you know, deeper into the housing crisis that is already actively displacing people, that is already leaving a lot of people to make some really tough decisions about whether or not to put down roots here, myself included. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thank you for your comments, Jana. Next public comment. Anybody else for public comment on this agenda item? Come on up.
Mayor Davis, council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I apologize for peppering you with the same emails twice today. I want to make sure you could print them the portrait you needed to. I have been diving into the out-of-sync condition between...
Say your name for the public.
I'm sorry, it's Andrew Hurst, last name is Hirss.
And speak into that mic if you would. Perfect.
Hirss. I'm from East Missoula. I've been looking at well, specifically, if you look at figures 32 and figures 30 in the land use planning document, one of them talks about, you know, current to planned zoning, that's 32, and that one shows East Missoula is out of jurisdiction. Okay, that makes sense. But then you look at 30, which is place type map, and there East Missoula is this big blotch of orange, urban residential high. I'm like, okay, except for that one little strip along the 200 corridor, which is properly envisioned in terms of place typing. I went to the county map and to see what they had, and they had 3 zones. The one that two that I'm concerned with are the live make, which have no representation whatsoever in the place type map, and the rest is residential. And residential is in no way comparable to urban residential high, and yet this entire section somehow got urban residential high. I've been looking at the criteria for applying urban residential high, and I've looked at the zoning map, county zoning map in comparison to the place type map, and I'm confused. So I'm wondering if city council members might be as well, and I'd love to have staff be able at some point, maybe we'll hear it on Wednesday, explain how they came up with urban residential high splashed on East Missoula, when in point of fact, the way the zoning should map per the LUP is for live, make, it should be urban mixed use low. And for the rest, residential, which is yellow, it should be limited urban residential. And yet that entire area is designated urban residential high. So I'll be curious to hear how we got there. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your comments.
Hi there. My name is Torin Etter. I'm a Ward 1 resident. I want to start out thanking everybody on council and city staff for all their efforts. I know this is a huge process, so thank you. I wanted to say that I agree with one of the earlier comments about not overdeveloping the Missoula Valley and the surrounding wild areas. But the only way that we can do that is to incentivize development within the bounds of our current city. As a small-scale developer myself, I have analyzed several of the small-scale infill developments that I've been involved in the last decade or so. Several of the relatively small houses that we have built would not be allowed under the UDC as proposed currently due to both FAR requirements and also landscape and activity areas required. I urge you to pass the amendments as proposed. It would reduce these requirements, strike a balance. Also, as a small-scale developer, I want to push back on the notion that developers only have profit in mind. As an architect and a builder, I've always had the choice to build out of town, pave over more deer, elk habitat and agricultural land, but I've made the choice to build inward instead. I share the values of many in this room. I value our open space, and I prioritize fighting climate change above all else. And this is one of the few opportunities that we have on a local level to actually make a difference. I think we've all seen things happening on the national level where we have a hard time making a difference, but here we can actually act and make a difference. A lot of the scientific research quoted by some earlier commenters about reduced carbon emissions closer to compact development are true. We can make that happen. Please continue to incentivize builders like myself and others to focus our development inward, pass the amendments as recommended by the Land Use and Planning Board. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments, Torin. Anybody else in the audience wishing to make public comment? Come on up. Come on up. And you're welcome to queue up.
I'm
And
Suzette. I'm
There you go.
Suzette Dussault, and thank you for being here. We have based our plan on this document, which is our vision for the future. Within that document, there are land use policy themes, one of the most important being community and quality of life, which encourages us to look at the historic concept of our planning and our vision of our community as we grow forward. I am not convinced that this document does that. We also are looking at Climate Ready Missoula report, which encourages us to look at all ways we can mitigate climate damage in our community. One of them being to watch how we build, that we do not build high-density urban heat spots. And I'm afraid that we're violating that in this plan. The other thing is that you have a document that you produce called A Place to Call Home, Meeting Missoula's Housing Needs. It identifies gentrification and areas where people will be most harmed by development. I suggest you look at this and that you recognize that the north side, west side is one of those areas that is most in danger of being gentrified. But yet in this document, you are looking at stories of 4- and 6-story buildings in those areas. In the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood is another area identified as a population that will be very severely impacted by gentrification. And so I encourage you to look at these documents. These are put in place. The other one is the newly adopted Parks Plan, which encourages access to natural habitat as closely as possible. It also speaks to the sense of place, that we are a community and we need to define who we are, that we encourage our sense of place. And I don't believe that this this plan puts that in place. I am specifically concerned about our historic neighborhoods. This is the plan for the downtown and part of the hip strip. These are two of the most beloved aspects of Missoula. When we talk about the soul of Missoula, when we talk about the heart of Missoula, and you actually identify it as the heart of Missoula, and yet you want to build the largest and biggest buildings in this downtown. I
Thank you, Ms.
suggest you
Dussault.
go back to the drawing board.
Thank you
and-
for your comments this evening, Ms. Dussault. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next public comment, come on up.
Hello, I'm Amy Sillenberg, CILIMBURG, and I run Climate Smart Missoula, which I've been doing for just over 10 years now. I think about climate change all the time, all day, and most of the nights. I am incredibly concerned that those risks that are forthcoming we can't get our minds around what they really are: heat, flooding, and some of these surfaces, some of these activities. So I wasn't going to speak tonight, but I just feel like we need to reiterate that we have to do things differently than we ever thought possible, and therein lies an incredible opportunity. I really believe that, as you've heard, Climate Smart really does want some landscapes, some green spaces, some living systems to be incorporated into our community. Activity areas are important. There is Casa Blue options. If they just simply don't fit, there are variances. We can make them work. I really believe, and we have seen this in this last year in particular, that people are overwhelmed and scared and want to know their neighbors. And it is in those small areas of not crappy lawns, but of cool pollinator plants, or where you grow something really unique and different that you meet your neighbors. It is in these activity areas where you get to build some social cohesion. And the only way we can address climate change is to be a community that is connected. And the only way we can be connected is to bump into each other and be with each other. And all we have gotten in the last year is people like, could we plant a tree? We want to plant trees. We want to plant things. We want to restore things. People want to get their hands into soil. They want to be part of nature, and it can't just be outside. It has to be integrated. It's really exciting to listen to read about what other landscape architects are being trained in, incorporating, deploying natural systems into the community. We don't have to do crappy lawns. We could do something amazing because we are Missoula and we care about each other and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Illenberg.
Good evening, Mayor Davis and City Council. My name is John Wolverton. I'm a resident of the near north side in Ward 1. I'm also a volunteer and founding member of Pro Housing Missoula. Over the last maybe week or two, I've heard there's been public dialogue that somehow the changes in this code would harm walkability. And that's absolutely not true. This code moves us toward a compact development, which is inherently much more walkable, a better environment for walkability. It's more equitable for kids, for elders, and much more enhanced visibility for less abled people. A lot of the conversation is about activity areas, and I'm going to touch on that. One thing that people need to be aware of is, as proposed, the activity area standard is would only be mandated for 10 units or more, and I understand that the planning board has suggested it should be 13. I would suggest that it needs to be eliminated entirely, and I'll talk about why. Activity areas being mandated within the private realm is problematic and will move our city in the wrong direction. We should focus on creating public activity areas, and I emphasize public activity areas, where people from across the community are always welcome. They're always fully welcome. They can share in sportsmanship, sharing their perspectives, their skills, agreements, and disagreements. And yes, disagreement with neighbors. It's healthy, it's democratic, and most of all, a way to develop tolerance. Let's not shift our capacity to where and how people can gather into the private realm. Considering the challenges our society is facing, which was talked about quite a bit earlier tonight, I suggest that it is imperative we expand our public spaces, such as plazas, parks, and community centers, and not require activity areas built behind private property, fence lines, or controlled by private interests, especially when those activity areas will displace potential for additional housing or make housing more expensive. Please eliminate the proposed activity areas from the UDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolverton. Anybody else in the room wishing to make public comment on this agenda item?
Jim Sayer, Ward 3. I don't envy you. You're hearing from really great people on all sides on the issue. And this was really similar to what happened at Planning Board, I recall, right? Yeah. And they created some guidelines for how to move forward on this, and I would encourage you to adopt that amendment that I think Councilmember Nugent's going to propose. And I say it also because I thought the most salient comment last week came from Councilmember Savage. I mean, I really appreciated what you said, Councilmember Melson, about the 8 bars and how we balance between all the values. But what you said about nip and tuck is not about plastic surgery. It is about how you can kind of vitiate the effects of your housing policy if you're not careful. Because you've got to step back and cumulatively, what are going to be all the effects of the changes that you're going to make to this? And really, you've seen dozens of projects brought before you that won't pencil because of all the requirements that are going to be heaped on them. So if you really are serious, the original intent of this project, the code reform and the land use map, was how do we create housing for the next 10 to 20 years? And you're saying you need 11 to 1,400 units a year. We're not anywhere near that number right now. And how are you going to facilitate that if we keep nipping and tucking the policy and the code? So I think the planning board went through the same process. I'd encourage you to take a close look at their amendment. I think you can get the balance that you need, because I do hear people like Amy, Abby, others who want to make sure we maintain green spaces and living systems in our city, and I think we can do both. But I really want to encourage you to focus on the housing, which is where we started in the first place 3 years ago. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments this evening, Jim.
Hello, Brittany Palmer, Ward 2. You've heard from me a few times in my role as an affordable housing practitioner, so tonight I kind of just want to talk more as a person and a community member. As I said, I'm a member of Ward 2, the West Side neighborhood, and a graduate of the Environmental Studies Master's Program. And for the record, I just want to say I love recreating outside here. That's part of why I love living here, and I love our parks and our trees. I recently spent a lot of time thinking about priorities kind of just in my own life, and the thing that came to mind for me, that's coming to mind for me tonight in this context, is just that you can really only focus on a few priorities at a time, or else they aren't your priorities. And so this is just coming to mind tonight, thinking about how we came together as a community about 3 years ago and identified the need to seriously and forcefully, I think, address the cost of living burden that so many Missoulians experience by increasing the supply of housing through this code reform process. I would love to see the council members tonight just keep your momentum going strong and ultimately pass a progressive code that prioritizes easing the cost of living for folks who are really struggling still. And who don't have access to stable, affordable housing. And that also prioritizes a more walkable urban center. I think the proposed code with amendments adds flexibility where it's badly needed, and these rules won't change anything for single-family homes. So if you want a yard, nobody is taking that away. And then as a housing practitioner, I've learned that we need supply, stability, and subsidy to fully bring down housing prices. And this means doing all we can to allow homes of all shapes and sizes in all neighborhoods, in addition to subsidizing the things that we really like as a community, like permanently affordable homes and like high quality green spaces, instead of relying on developers to plant all of our trees, for example. I think having a big yard is a luxury for folks who are just looking for somewhere affordable to live. And so by allowing flexible, denser living in town, we can solve for both the unaffordability of homes in addition to the climate benefit of preventing sprawl. And I think the more rules we put in place, the further that we are getting from our community priority of easing the cost of housing, which was, identified in the land use plan and in our Missoula processes. And so I just encourage you to pass the planning board recommendations on landscape and activity areas in particular, and to bump up the floor area ratio and the density where you can. And again, thanks for all your work. This has been a long process, and so I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Thanks for your comments. Anybody else in the audience wanting to make public comment? All right, I'm going to move to online. I do see that David Gray, you have your hand raised. So when you are ready, please go ahead and unmute. No, I saw your hand. There it is.
All right, can you hear me this time?
Sure can.
Thank you. This is David Gray with DVG Architects. I asked City Council to adopt a landscaping amendment proposed by the Planning Board and Councilman Nugent to provide a more flexible landscaping solution for multi-family and commercial projects in the city. The Planning Board changes are not to harm the walkability or the green space experienced by the public due to new development. Most everyone agrees that boulevard trees are desirable along the streets as an amenity, but are not more important than new homes or places of employment or business if one tree needs to be moved for a driveway. Front yard and boulevard landscapes make our city walkable and a green city. In the slant streets, the boulevard and front yards will provide 30 feet of green space, even with the reduced front yard of 50% of current zoning. In the Franklin and the Fort, you would get 20 feet of green space, as our boulevards are not as wide. These are the green and walkable spaces experienced by the general public. The new landscaping rules in the UDC concerning on-site landscaping are inflexible and will lower infill housing units in the city core, which the city desperately needs to meet the city's housing goals. We need to build 3 times more housing per year than is currently being submitted for building permits. The old and new landscaping rules were designed for suburbia and not a densifying urban city. The Planning Board amendments to the landscaping sections were made to acknowledge that infill development in the city core is key to reaching the city's housing goals for new homes, neighborhoods that are mixed use, walkable, and multimodal. Landscaping rules need to be recognized that infill and not scrape and replace development maintains neighborhood character. The public does not experience the landscaping behind a building or behind a fence or a hedge or really along the side of a building. The public experiences what is between the front of the building and the street. That is where the emphasis of landscape rules should concentrate. Any outdoor area is an activity area for people. Be it the side yard, occupied roof, front yard, boulevard, or front porch. Designating a specific area where that is the only place for an outdoor activity is so focused on an idea that it misses the reality of how people live and play. The Planning Board amendments recognize multifaceted issues with infill development and made minor but necessary changes to the proposed UDC language to meet Missoula's landscaping needs, while allowing for a denser urban city to be redeveloped over the next 20 years. Appreciate your time and all your efforts.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Gray. Anybody? Yes, I see that we have Ryan Salisbury online for a public comment. Go ahead and unmute, Ryan, when you're ready.
Hello, good evening, councilors. My name is Ryan Salisbury, and I'm the Vice President of Land Planning and Development at WGM Group here in Missoula. I also was a member of our Missoula Advisory Committee, so I've been in many meetings the past 2 years, dating back to January 2024. I'd like to advocate for City Council to strongly consider approving the changes that were recommended by the Planning Board. And Councilor Nugent, a great deal of work has gone into this form-based code by the private sector, and they have worked really hard to make recommended changes that are both good for the general public, but also make development viable. And this all started about the time the Planning Board was considering form-based code. So quite a bit of ground is covered by the private sector, consultants, architects, engineers, and others, landscape architects, to make projects viable. Development is a delicate balance, and the input from the private sector and the Planning Board will provide walkable communities and green space. The development community will provide great development and provide housing that includes street trees and abundance of open space and landscaping. Developers need a marketable product. Excuse me. Each property our company, WGM Group, provides advice on and moves forward through the entitlement and permitting process is different. Different shapes of property, different challenges, floodplain, storm drainage, topography. So with all those challenges, flexibility in development and the ability for city staff to provide variances and administrative approvals is critical for developers to want to keep providing housing in Missoula and supply housing and maintain the best chance of affordability. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Salisbury. And we have one more hand raised online, and that's a phone number ending in 3844. I did just see your hand went down. If you unmute now, I assume you do want to make comments. There you go, you're unmuted.
Oh, hey, thank you. Hello, City Council and City staff. This is Sarah Giuliani. Thank you for your hard work and thoughtful discussion regarding the new UDC. I do not support the amendments to reduce landscaping requirements and eliminate activity areas. I wholeheartedly agree with what Councilor Melton said at the Wednesday committee meeting for all the reasons he articulated. He listed 8 values we are trying to balance as a city, including long-term adaptability. As more wealth is concentrated in fewer hands and cuts to healthcare, childcare, and food assistance are made on the federal level, the long-term adaptability value is especially important. These activity and landscaping areas could be spaces for pollinator gardens to promote the health of nature and our food system, and or vegetable gardens where people can grow their own food. More and more communities will need to support themselves on the local level, i.e. growing food, versus federal programs, and we must be prepared for this by having the space to adapt. I also want to address the potential unintended consequence of the UDC, which will promote more large apartment complexes. This week I came upon a real estate listing that caught my eye. These are some excerpts from the listing. Attention investors, developers, this is a unique residential opportunity within a sought-after location. While the value is in the land, there are 3 1980s manufactured homes on the property currently occupied. This is a fantastic opportunity within the Garden City, offering the chance to shape your investment dreams in a sought-after location. I imagine the people living in these mobile homes would say the value is in having a roof over their heads and housing security. There will be an uptick in people living in homes that they can currently afford being displaced as the land under their homes is sold for an investment opportunity. One may argue that the benefit outweighs the cost because more units can be squeezed on the lot, but tell that to the people who will be displaced. The newly built multifamily complex bordering this parcel charges $1,895 a month for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, which is likely far more than what the people living in their mobile homes are paying. I haven't heard any discussion around the displacement of these vulnerable populations due to these investment opportunities. These are the characters that make up this neighborhood. Where will they go? Will they become homeless? Will they be pushed out of Missoula? This does not seem very pro-housing to me. It would be good to hear the council discuss this issue of displacement, as it is of great concern and will impact many. There's also the issue of an investor utilizing these parcels for income property versus building a few homes on a small footprint on a parcel that would be more sustainable and attainable for an individual or family to purchase. Thank you again for all your service. This code is a massive undertaking, and I know you've all dedicated hours to understand the implications. And also thank you, Ms. Davies from Common Good and Amy from Climate Smart for your pertinent comments tonight. Also, go East Missoula, your community cohesion amazing.
Thank you, Ms. Giuliani.
And that's it, thanks.
All right, that does wrap up all of the public comment online. I don't see any additional hands raised. All right, folks, thank you all very much for providing public comment this evening. Pretty appreciate everybody coming down this evening. I think for the way we're going to move forward with this agenda item, we do have an update from our staff just to give us a summary of where we are and how we got here, and then we'll kick off the amendment process. Before we do that, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to be here for a little bit. There's a chance that we know that the council intends to work through some items. We may or may not vote on this evening. If not, like I mentioned at the beginning, it will go back to the Land Use and Planning Committee on Wednesday. We are going to take a 10-minute break. And so it is 8:18. At 8:28, I will call us back to order. Thank you. Okay, folks, I'm going to gavel us back in. Time to start our meeting again. Go ahead and take a seat. I'm going to call the Missoula City Council meeting to order at 8:30 p.m. If you need to continue to have a conversation, you may do so out in the hall, down the hall, and outside. But we're going to go ahead and continue our meeting. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thanks again to all who came down. All right. Okay, Councilor Nugent.
All right, thank you, Mayor Davis. We left
Absolutely.
off in LUP in 4.9, item 2.
And Councilor, before you start on the amendment list,
Yes.
would you mind can we just do a quick lay of the land from Aaron Pehan as a quick summary of where we're at?
Yes.
Just so folks know where we are in the point of the process, and then
100%.
Okay, excellent.
Staff, do you want to give us a quick update?
Sure, yes. Erin Pahan with CPDI. I can provide a quick update for council in the audience about where we're at in this process. So we opened and closed the public hearing on January 12th and have had 2 work sessions since then, one on the 14th and one on the 21st. During those work sessions, we've moved through a lot of material. We approved a staff package of amendments on the code on January 14th. We approved a second staff amendment on code and some map changes on January 21st. We've also moved through many sections of the code, including Articles 4.2, which are residential districts, and we voted on amendments related to FAR, building size, height, and how many units are in a building. We moved through Article 4.3 and amendments on the mixed-use districts related to form standards, where they apply, and exempting certain uses. We moved through Articles 4.4, special purpose districts, and 4.6, historic preservation and overlays, as well as Articles 4.7, building standards, and 4.8, uses. We finished our work session on the 21st after discussion and 1 vote on Article 4.9, site standards in the area of landscaping. We have 6 amendments more to discuss in that area on landscaping and 4 on parking. And then we also have sections 4.14 with sign amendments 2 to discuss. Chapter 6, which is our infrastructure chapter, we have 4 amendments there. And then we have 10 map amendments, which are to the published zoning map itself. There are some paper copies of the amendment tracker on the table right by the door, and there are, once those run out, the amendment tracker is also uploaded to eScribe, so anybody can click on the link down there to follow along as well.
All right. Aaron, thank you very much. Back to you, Councilor Nugent.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. So we had an amendment on the floor, but we did not vote on that in LUP. So we're at item 2, which is amendment regarding activity area exemptions for infill development near parks. And I want to put that amendment on the floor, but I want to draw attention to council members that in conversations since Wednesday with my ward mate, Councilwoman Cheryl, and others, I've actually adjusted the distance from the park from the Prost recommended 0.5 down to 0.25 miles, so a quarter mile. And the reason for that was originally with this amendment, the idea was if we were aligned with Prost, which is the adopted parks plan, that of having a park or some sort of public open space, open trailer, something like that within a half mile, that's considered walkable or rollable. But with the idea kind of trying to find that trade-off so that people can have something close to their residence, but also allow for the flexibility of if they are within a certain distance of a park, specifically that while a mile or a half mile is walkable and rollable, the thought process was that if you are a young parent filling up a wagon full of stuff to take to a park, like you feel like you have to pack everything for about a half a mile, but a quarter mile is a little bit more of a reasonable walk. So the amendment on the floor is to exempt infill developments from activity area requirements if they're within 1/4 mile of a public park that's city owned or leased. And it is exactly as it's written on the amendment tracker that staff prepared and is attached to our agenda. And I can speak to it more if people have questions.
All right, Council Nugent, thank you very much. So we have the amendment on the floor. Any council questions? Yes, Councilor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, thank you, Councilor Nugent, for this amendment. I think we have to be mindful of to what extent we're going to exercise activity areas as proposed. And the effect they have on development, particularly infill development, smaller lots, and just trying to be mindful of, our overall mission, which is, I think, to provide more housing stock, and direct those folks that are maybe going to be in higher density areas towards more walkable areas, trails, parks within a given distance. So I appreciate the adjustment on the distance there, but I'm just wondering if you'd be open to striking subsection Roman numeral 3. I wonder, or maybe you just generally speak to where you came up with the formula of tracing a quarter mile, given, as I understand it, looking at here, trails, sidewalks, roadways, or planned trails, how we differentiate between what's existing, what's planned, and, how we maintain, I just kind of think of ahead, how we would maintain consistency amongst developers and, pointing an area here and how we're going to calculate that out with what's existing, what isn't, and elaborate on that.
Yep. Am I good to answer that question?
Please do. Sorry. Thank you.
Happy to answer that, Councilman Campbell. That actually comes from Prost itself, which was concerned with if a park is close enough by distance, but actually isn't easy to get to. Like if there is a barrier that's not easy to roll across, for instance, or to push a stroller across, or things like that. That language actually is pulled straight from Prost. So the idea is that if we are making an exception because it's nearby a park, that it is actually that park is actually accessible. So that's where that language comes from.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. And Councilor Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. I have a comment and also a question. So I first want to, I stopped the conversation on Wednesday. We had a very long day and we got into this and I said, can we just stop and not vote on this and kind of take a breather and look at all these amendments together that are talking about landscaping and activity area. So I appreciate my ward mate doing that. And I know that all of us have been doing some work since then, and we have met and we have talked to different people about that. So I think that makes for better decisions, even though I realize this is taking a while to get done. I think that the comments from the public are a pretty good summation of the tension that we are feeling up here, and the tension of making these decisions. So, we're worried about density versus sprawl. Those both have environmental impacts, right? We're worried about, not having permeable surfaces, but also not having lower density and then having a weed patch. So, I could go on and on. I know that all of us up here are feeling it. And I think that if you were listening closely to the public comment, the public is feeling it. And it is interesting to me because being on council for now my 7th year, most of the people that were coming up and are on different sides of this have been on the same side of a lot of issues in the past and have been in this chamber asking us to do one cohesive thing. So I think that really just shows the difficulty in some of this. So I was very happy to, as we worked through this weekend, I was happy about the change from 0.5, or I guess this weekend and today, to 2.25. That makes sense to me, and I think that it that was walkable. I reflect on, I'm about, 0.5 from Bonner Park, and I was thinking that was like a big outing when I had two little kids, like, to get there. So 0.25 makes more sense. And to me, I think it's a good balance. So I am planning on supporting this. I appreciate you taking the time to work through that. I'm curious, as we're looking, I don't know if this would be for Mike or for staff, and I know that we've not had a chance to really map this all out, but kind of where you think that making that amendment from 0.5 to 0.25, like, where is that going to kind of open some things up and change them? Mike, do you want to answer that, or?
I can start and then staff can fill in. I think the big area and another reason I think it makes sense to me to pull it back a little bit is to make sure that in the neighborhoods that are identified as underparked, like Franklin to the Fort or the River Road area, it kind of makes sure that there isn't a loophole that someone's jumping through on something that maybe isn't perfect. While there's a lot of other neighborhoods where public comment and our process have indicated we'd like to see more density that do have parks that would meet this criteria. I don't know if staff has anything to add to that, but those were kind of the areas that I felt like would benefit from this even further.
Okay. Any additional comments from staff on that?
I guess my only note, and maybe a question, would be why the limited urban residential districts aren't listed under this exception. Those are often mapped to kind of newer parts of town that do have existing park infrastructure. So as far as where this applies and doesn't, that might be a good clarification.
And so, we had discussed this, and I'm open to pulling that if you think this would be better to just say this is applicable across across all of our districts rather than identifying.
I think that just in terms of treating different developments equitably, it might make sense to give them all the benefit of this exception.
So that would remove item A1, right?
Correct.
So without objection from anybody, I would amend my motion to remove the specific outlying so it applies to all districts.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Nugent. All right. And I'll move on to the next council comment or question here. Councilor Melson.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I just want to kind of reiterate the intent, my understanding of the amendment, which is to provide more flexibility for infill housing. And by doing that, we're proposing exempting projects from on-site activity area requirements when they're located within now a quarter mile, which I think is a great change and update, reducing that proximity. But I spent a lot of time this weekend thinking about this, and I think proximity matters, and I think equating proximity to functional equivalence matters. What I mean by that is, like, there's a lot of variation in our parks. The size, the quality, the amenities, the capacity to accept more people. Not every park within a quarter mile from a new development is the same as all the other parks within a quarter mile of other developments. They all require different maintenance levels. They all require different capacities. And I think what this does is, and we've heard about it in public comment, is it shifts the responsibility for livability from the private development to the public sector. And by that, I mean, we're not holding developers to the standard that we have and having them improve our community and provide community benefit. I think this reduces the guaranteed sort of on-site shared space that provides connection. And there was a lot of talk about flexibility. We need more flexibility. And I was looking at the actual section 4.9, and I just want to read the activity area flexibility. Types of activity areas. You can build a fruit or vegetable garden. You can build a playground. You can build a common area courtyard. You can build an active recreation lawn. You can build a sport court. You can build an ornamental garden. You can build a trail corridor. You can build a shared roof deck. You can build an indoor activity area so long as it meets the requirements of the section and the intent of the section. So flexibility, I think there's a ton of flexibility in all of those different options. And I just want to go back to like the experience of someone living in these apartment buildings, these development areas, these developments. The experience, I think, matters for the people that are there. And I understand the choice of lower rent and a lower barrier of entry to get into a house that is less expensive. And I don't see any guarantee on here that if we remove activity areas, it's going to make the rents of these apartments more affordable. So if you're willing to take an amendment to tie that, to remove an activity area, there's a great idea in public comment about providing some kind of a flexible, more flexibility, that if you can meet a certain qualification for affordability, then we can exempt the activity areas so that it actually does connect to a lower rent and an easier entry to housing. So I'd be open to discussing that as an amendment or as an expansion to this concept around activity area exemption if we really truly want to focus it on affordability.
So I will not be accepting that amendment, and I will explain why quickly if you'd like. First of all, Councilwoman Jordan has an amendment to address that to some level that I think we can talk about that. One of the big issues we have in Missoula is there's a big gap between what people can afford that's permanently subsidized and what in the market can be built. And that's that kind of missing middle. And we've had people who build infill housing come up and give us public comment tonight. We've had developers send in emails that kind of outline how if we keep things as is, they could probably do the same number of units, but they're going to have to do them as luxury units and aim them at a higher demographic than the AMI because, you know, when we put some of those extra regulations on them, that adds to the per cost unit. And that means that to cover that payment every month, they have to raise the rent. So based on all that feedback from, I think, some well-respected people who have worked in development who are in this room right now who have given us comment, I think that by only tying that as a permanently affordable option, it is going to limit the people that it helps because there are people struggling to afford to live in Missoula that will never qualify for a subsidy. And we need to make sure that we aren't just a community that has subsidized housing and very high-end housing. And so that's just not where I'm at. And I can speak to some of the other stuff when we do comments, but.
I appreciate that. And I guess just one more thing that I've been thinking about is just sort of the accumulation of these actions over time. And I mean, this is a 20-year plan. And I just worry that repeated exemptions in some of those high growth areas could materially erode like the neighborhood level activity area, green space, livability, the vibrancy of these areas. I think what I'm really concerned about is housing at all costs without livability, without a quality experience. And we've all seen those like dystopian sci-fi films and where they're living in pods in, massive skyscrapers. I know we're not heading down that road. But I am really just trying to think of the people that are living in these places and the tiny amounts of freedom and livability that they get in their apartment complex. And I'm going to be against this amendment for those reasons. And yeah, we'll just see where this goes, but appreciate the conversation.
Councilman Nelson, thank you for your comments and conversation. I wanted to just clarify, are you putting an amendment on the floor of this amendment?
It was not a
friendly amendment. You could propose an amendment, which would then need to go through a vote. I just want to clarify.
Feeling I know where that'll go, so I'm going to hold that amendment.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, I after having a really good conversation with Colin Lane over here last week, I felt like, how did we get to the place where it's either affordable housing or green space? Like, how did all of this work lead us down the path that we are suddenly saying the only way we're going to get affordable housing is if we get rid of all our green spaces? And I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle, where I had another interesting conversation with Shibu. I don't know if he's still here or not, but there he is, who reminded me that some people don't want yards and don't necessarily need the same access to activity areas that somebody like myself does. I could never live without a yard. And that was a really good reminder to me that not everybody who moves here is moving here so that they can have a bit of wilderness in downtown. But I also am really interested in making sure that we maintain and enhance our urban canopy and whatnot. And so I think that now we're getting into the nuances of livability versus affordability. And I really appreciate this amendment, because I was thinking about being a mama too, and how hard it is to pack everything up and walk somewhere when you don't have the space near your house, but a quarter mile is doable. And think that we're just getting into the weeds here necessarily so that we can start making sure that we're not picking affordability over livability and vice versa. And these conversations are going to help us get there. And so I will totally support this amendment. I think it's a great one. And also want to make sure that we keep our landscaping goals in mind, because I do want those canopy trees and the pollinator gardens and the things that will help with urban heat sinks and carbon sequestration. So yeah, I think I appreciate this, even though I'd love everybody to have their big old yard, but some people don't even want them. It's so weird.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Nugent.
I think Ms. Anderson had her hand up and
Oh, I'm
somehow
sorry.
we missed it.
I don't see it on my screen, so something's playing funny in there. Councillor Anderson, please.
The technology gremlins are real, and I'm
yes.
glad that you are experiencing that. And
Yes.
so it's not just us sometimes. If it would be okay with Mr. Nugent, I have my questions to staff really, I think, pertain to both this amendment and the next one that's up. Would you be okay if I asked for both, an explanation on both, even though we're technically not talking about amendment, the adopted planning board landscaping recommendations not already addressed through staff amendments?
Sure, but I just want to reserve that when we present that one, I want to explain why I've brought it forward from the planning board. So.
Okay, and that's fair. Then maybe that would not, I don't mean to jump the gun. I guess I appreciate the comments from Councillor Melson in regards to, it's all about striking a balance and not trying to forsake one for the other. And I realize that if you are housed, that it may seem, getting into basic housing is the priority and making that as affordable as possible. But I do have a concern that there is nothing in this that necessarily guarantees our ability to, the trade-off while we're getting rid of activity space does not guarantee that we are going to end up with more affordable housing. So that is my concern, because I do think, these little plots of green, whether or not they be a yard, activity space, or whatever, are important for a variety of reasons, and we've heard a lot about that tonight. So I'm wondering, and my question to staff is if they have some feedback on kind of the juxtaposition that we find ourselves in, housing versus landscaping, and why it is that staff came to this recommendation, or not activity space, not landscaping. And then the only other question I have is in regards to subsection 3, where it says quarter-mile distance as measured along an existing or planned, and it says public roadway, sidewalk, trail, and other. And I worry that public roadway doesn't really, we have talked a lot about sidewalks and ability to get in around the community. And if you are mobility challenged or you are with a stroller or small children. And so I think to me achieves the goal a little bit better if you have a designated sidewalk, trail, or other pedestrian route. And I realize it's not required to cross a barrier, which is an interstate, railroad, major river. I mean that, but I don't want in some of our areas where the neighborhoods that are seeing a lot of infill, that just walking along a road get to a park therefore meets this requirement. So would you be open to striking public roadway from number 3?
I believe that I pulled that from Prost, so I'm not interested in striking it. But if there's a correction from somebody that that's not accurate, and part of the reason is that while I recognize our sidewalk grid isn't perfect, and there are some amendments that I plan on supporting around that, my guess would be Wednesday, not today. But I think that at some point we're getting too specific. Like if the type of tenant that is going to live in this potential rental housing isn't always going to be like a mom with children. It might be somebody who rides their bike. There's all sorts of reasons. And I just think that the idea is that if they're close enough to a park to get there in a relatively easy manner, that should satisfy the need to have an activity area, because the whole idea of the activity area is to give them the opportunity to be out. So I'm not going to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, not accepted as a friendly. Councillor Anderson, do you wish to amend the amendment?
No, I'm not going to do that at this time, but I would like staff to sort of answer a little bit of why it is that they came to this particular amendment recommendation while the struggle for housing that we are facing.
Staff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. True. Okay. But I guess it's like why you are amending what staff recommended. And so if staff could talk to why they made the recommendation that they made, that you are now amending, would be great.
Okay, so the original staff recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, staff did not recommend a similar amendment coming out of the letter that was approved by Planning Commission, mostly because even within a quarter mile, these developments do add density to the area, which does add impacts to the park. So even nearby, those activity areas can take some of the strain off of those parks, or cash in lieu can lead to more park amenities to help serve that increased density.
Great, thanks. And that's basically what I was trying to get at. And I appreciate the examples that Mr. Melson gave, because it's not just simply like an activity area, going back to the original, like, okay, mom with kids walking to the park. There's all sorts of other things. And I think that, when you build, many times the building that you're hoping to build will be there for a significant amount of time. And so while we have an immediate housing need that I am incredibly aware of, I also understand that, there is the trade-off for green space, and whether that is like a quote-unquote traditional activity area or a vegetable garden or something else, I think that those livability and affordability are intertwined in that. So I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And Councillor Nugent, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Davis. I'll speak to a little bit of some of the questions. And first of all, I want to stress that none of this applies to single-family housing, which some of the comments were, but it also doesn't eliminate the landscaping requirements. Those are separate things. And not only does it not eliminate the landscaping requirements, the right-of-way improvements and the street trees aren't included in the landscape requirements. They're a separate thing. So I think it's very misleading to kind of suggest that if we eliminate the activity area, that kind of all that broader commitment to climate and trees and some of that livability is going away, because it's not. I think that there are a lot of people who have commented who actually build houses and build apartments and build infill. And some of them have been nonprofit housing developers. Some of them have been market rate housing developers. We've seen things from multiple people, and they're all saying, hey, this isn't perfect. So I recognize the concern, but I think that's something that continuously gets ignored by people who don't ever have to build houses or make projects pencil. is how the things that get added on impact that. And we have a whole slew of people from the design community, developers, from a wide range of housing types, including permanently affordable, who are saying this sort of requirement is creating issue. I'm not advocating for eliminating it entirely, which is what some people at the planning board wanted, and a lot of public comment has. I'm trying to find a balance, but I think that the activity area is within a certain distance from a park. A quarter mile, I think we decided it's like 3 blocks. That's a reasonable amount of space, and that we're not sacrificing community goals, and that the trade-off there is trying to get more density, because focusing inward means we want people to build housing inward. We want them to want to build in these areas. So.
Thank you, Councillor Nugent. Councillor Jones.
I'll be supporting this tonight, and I just wanted to provide a few comments. To me, all of this is a compromise. As Mr. Melson said, there's all these levers where we're pulling all of the different levers. This is an area in which I think this is a reasonable compromise, and if it helps in the category of getting some unfeasible projects to the across the line to feasible, then that's the win. I also think this is something that consumers will figure out. They'll figure out where they want to live and what their values are, and if they want a yard or if they really don't care about it that much. And I've mentioned this before, my daughter, who is in her 20s, lives a couple of blocks from here in a studio. It's not a one-bedroom, it's a studio downtown in a building that was probably built 80 or 90 years ago. It's old. There's no activity area. And before I walked out the door tonight, she was dog sitting for me. I said, okay, where do you go when you want to go read a book outside in the summertime? And she said she goes to either Best Read Park or Greeno Park. So she makes it work. Now, for her to be in her 20s and to be able to have a place she can pay her own rent and make that work with her salary and have her own autonomy to live on her own and have a life is a much higher value than having that activity area. So I think this is a reasonable compromise, and people will figure it out, and I'm happy voting for it.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Becerra.
Thanks. I just want to go back to Ms. Anderson's point regarding the public roadway under subsection 3, and I hear what you're saying, but I do think that the way it reads, it's simply a way to measure that distance. So we're not just looking at a park and drawing a straight line to where the development is, and rather I think it's just looking at a quarter of a mile on a surface that you can walk on to get to that park. And so I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think I have that concern, because I'm seeing it as a way to measure. You can't do bird's eye view measurement. You have to measure it along something that you can actually use to get to that amenity. But I do have a question for staff, and I don't know if anyone from Parks is here, but I thought I read in the Prost that lack of pedestrian infrastructure is considered a barrier. And I don't know that that's how it reads now under section 3 or subsection 3.
Hi, I'm Lucy Rumler. I work with Parks and Recreation, and when we mapped the 10-minute walk or roll, we did not have a fully a good enough map out of the sidewalk network to say, here's all the gaps, and so we did use we did include roadways, and so if it wasn't, I'm sorry, I don't remember if you said fully accessible or just fully connected, but it just had to be what you said, like a surface that you could walk on.
But yeah, I think in that section of pros, there's something that identifies like railroads or different highways as barriers to that walkability, if you will. Is lack of pedestrian infrastructure also a barrier?
It was not we had initially hoped to use that as a barrier, but without that really robust mapping data, we didn't end up using that. And it is railroads, highways, and the river. And I can't remember off the top of my head if we used Brooks and a couple other major corridors as well.
Okay, thank you. I just want to offer my comments now in support of this amendment. I do think that Ms. Cheryl made a great point that what we hear from the community is exactly how we might be feeling in terms of trying to strike that balance, understanding the need for more housing in their community, but not losing ourselves in that mandate and continuing to provide opportunities for our community to have access to these open spaces. It's an equalizer. An open space, a park is a place that everyone should have access to. And I think short of everyone having a well-maintained activity area, I think the quarter-mile distance to such place offers that balance, and therefore I'll be in support of it. I also want to say that, you know, once we implement this code, if we need to come back and tweak these different, you know, levers and see if it's not working and we need to do something else, we will do that. But we need to put something on the ground, something right now that we adopt, and let it roll out, and let's see how it turns out. Let's see if it's working, if it's not working, and then make those amendments as we see fit. So because of that, I'll be in support of it.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Becerra. And Councillor McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The comments have been so eloquent so far. They've almost covered everything I wanted to say, really. I also wanted to not only thank the public comment, but just highlight the fact that I'm not sure if I've ever seen public comment capture the tensions that we're wrestling with up here so well, right? And I really hope that everybody was able to listen to everybody speak tonight, right? Like, we had for and against from public. We had for and against from nonprofit organizations. We had professional community members, the developers, architects coming in and trying to let us know why these amendments we're proposing help them pencil. We didn't have any giant builders come in. I've never talked to anybody that's some huge developer from New Mexico, because they don't really care about the nuances that we're debating in here, because they can afford to do whatever they want, no matter what our rules are. So I just really was unbelievably impressed at how that tension was captured by the public comment, and how now you're seeing that reflected in our debate. We are debating very nuanced things, and everybody up here, I think I can safely speak, is trying to meet our values and goals within the LUP. It just depends on how you're weighing some of those things. I 110% agree with Mr. Melson's comments. And I have also been hammering on these issues for months now through the planning board and now city council. And I have heard loud and clear from our local developers that our standards, even with lots of options to make choices, are still creating unsurmountable hurdles to good projects. That projects everybody in our community would like to see move forward. And what we're trying to do is find a balance. It's not going to be perfect. We're trying to find the balance that Mr. Melson articulated well on Wednesday, Ms. Becerra is articulating well. We're trying to come up with a balance that we can put in motion. And then this is very important. And then we are going to evaluate and come back and look at these things. I, for one, will fight for that tooth and nail, because I recognize how important that is to this process. And that's just kind of a long way of saying that I am in support of this motion. Because for me, it gives us a little bit more flexibility to try and strike this balance here and now in the moment. And then as we go forward, these debates are going to continue. You are going to hear us bring these things back up and see if we can do something better. See if we can work with staff to find better balances, better ways to shift those bar graphs, to put environment in the pot more, to have more landscaping, whatever it is that the community wants. But for me, what I have discovered is right now, this is kind of our best balance to try and create the housing that we're looking for, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. And so I will be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor McCoy. I do not see any additional council hands raised. So I'll just make an all last call. Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Krask, what is your hand raised? I'm
No,
sorry
I
for
just
technology.
raised it.
Okay, great. Not an issue. I just want to make sure it wasn't me missing it.
I want to echo what a lot of folks up here have said, and this tension within the community and this tension within myself, and my two of my biggest priorities and values of housing and climate, but also the reason primarily why I wanted to join City Council in the first place was to serve my community. And this is really hard when your community is asking for a lot of different things. As a teacher, if I put my teacher hat on, the question was always, what is best for students? And that was pretty easy to answer. It's pretty easy to look at a group of kids and say, I think this is going to be best. It's a lot harder for me to put on my hat and say what's best for constituents, because we've heard what's best for constituents are all of these things. In some ways, I think we're winning. We're winning by getting here in the first place. We're winning by increasing housing density. I brought an amendment to increase height of buildings, hoping that adding some height could add some density and also provide room for activity and landscaping. Unfortunately, that didn't get passed, but trying to find that balance of how we can prioritize both climate and housing and community. I think that we find community in shared spaces. I know that in my neighborhood, when I'm walking around, we don't have sidewalks, but when I'm walking on the roads, that's how we've met a lot of our friends in the neighborhood. That's how we've created community. That's what makes us want to stay there. And sometimes that's in the middle of the road, and sometimes that's in a park, and sometimes that's in some other shared third space. So all this is to say that I have this real tension of how do we provide community? How do we support community? How do we support relationships? How do we talk to each other? To have a vibrant community, we also need people to be able to live here. So we need to be able to house people. And if we can't house people and we don't, then an activity area doesn't really matter much if the people who we need to house, we can't house. And at the same time, I have this desire for these spaces and for meeting as many of our climate goals as we can. And I just wanted to go on the record saying all of this so that everybody is really aware of my priorities and where I'm coming from. In the same vein as some counselors have mentioned, I'm gonna also say that I think that we could look at tracking activity areas, and if it is preventing development, if we're finding that things aren't penciling out, that's something that we could look at rolling back. So it works both ways, right? Again, this tension is like, we could get rid of it and then add it back in, or we could start with it and we could take it out. I don't know that there's one great answer. I feel a lot of tension within this. I want to support my community. I want to live my values. And I think that for these reasons, for all of these reasons, I'm going to be a no on this because I want to support those spaces in which people can connect with one another and find community. And if we find that that is not working and that it is preventing development and it is not happening, then I am so happy to have that conversation.
All right. Thank you for your thoughtful comments, Councillor Krask. All right. I think that does wrap up all of our council comments. And I just wanted to say for process purposes, Mr. Goldman, I see that your hand is raised. We have conducted all of our public comment this evening at the beginning of the meeting. That's why we held public comment prior to hearing all amendments. So I won't be calling on public comment for each amendment item. That was something that we coordinated at the very beginning of our meeting this evening. So I just wanted to let you know that. And then before taking any final votes this evening, should that happen, there will be another round of public comment. So with that, I do believe that we have taken all council comments and we can vote on this particular amendment. Is that correct? All right. All right. We'll do a roll call vote then, Ms. Trimble.
I asked Erin how she wants me to identify the amendment according to the tracker.
Absolutely.
Claire, do you mean in regards to the number?
Just to make sure that we're corresponding on what, so that I can, I know the substance, but if you have it as a certain kind of name or notation, I'm happy to say that for the record.
So this is under 4.9 site standards, landscaping, amendment number 2, activity area exemption for infill development near parks.
All right, so what she said.
Quick question, did we strike number 1?
We did, and for clarification purposes, thank you, Councilor Melson. Roman numeral small I has been struck, so 4.9, 2 and 3 is what people are voting on right now.
All right, proceeding with our vote, beginning with Anderson.
No.
Becerra.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Trask.
No.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
McCoy.
Yes.
Melson.
No.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Melson.
Sorry, no.
Nugent.
Yes.
Taunton.
Yes.
Savage.
Yes.
And Cheryl.
Yes.
All right, that is 9 in favor and 3 opposed, so that amendment does pass.
Okay. Thank you all very much for the discussion. We'll move on to the next amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. This is item 3, which is a motion to adopt planning board landscaping recommendations that are not already addressed through staff amendments. And the reason I brought this forward was simply because I sat through all 16 hours, however many hours of the planning board there was over multiple nights in the public comment. And the conversation around this, I think, was thoughtful. And I felt that we owed it to that conversation to have it here as well. You will notice that if you've been tracking the amendment tracker that this amendment got a lot smaller because much of what the planning board recommended we have adopted. So I am putting this on the floor simply for us to consider the rest of the planning board's recommendation. And more or less, that's my justification for it. That was a recommendation from the planning board. So I feel like we owe it. But I do, having talked to staff today, I would appreciate it if they could explain a little bit of why what's still sitting here is still sitting here in their minds.
Okay, thank you. Turn it over to staff.
Yeah, there are 17 pages, each with multiple red lines per page. And each of those red lines has a very different impact. So I don't know how you want to structure this. I can just kind of start going through them and we can stop at any point for discussion if that works. Does that sound good?
So does the 17 pages include stuff that we've already voted on through staff amendments?
A few things, but there are many items that staff did not include in their amendments.
Yeah, so, well, getting looks from council. Ms. Jones, I'll defer.
I'm wondering, I know we're not going to finish tonight. We'll be back Wednesday. I feel like if there was a cut and paste document put together and then we could look at it and see what's not. I mean, if it's typos or cleanup, that's not the issue. It's really the substantive items. But if there was some way of just having that in a bullet points in a document, I think that would give us a lot more clarity and then we could discuss it.
Can we postpone this amendment then?
I don't mind pushing this one until Wednesday. That's fine. Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, 4.93 is pushed to Wednesday. We'll now move on to 4.94.
Sorry, Mayor, I just have a question about that last one. Where can we find we are getting so deep with the documents on Engage Missoula and all of those things. Like, where can we find that?
Okay, I'll turn to staff for.
Are you looking for the letter in particular that is being referenced, or?
I guess I am looking for the planning board adopted recommended amendments.
So
That particular.
I sent those, if you look for email to City Council on Friday. I sent the Planning Commission recommended amendments packet alongside with that particular letter that they reference from Ms. Dinsmore. So that's all together in one email. They're all uploaded to the public record for members of the public, but for ease, I pulled those documents out and sent them directly to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to number 4. Sorry, you're right. Councillor Jordan.
All right, we are on page 7, number 4. Erin, thank you for putting page numbers on. Awesome. Anyway, I brought this one forward after having a conversation with the architect who's trying to help the bistro build affordable housing. And I, again, just got really stuck on how our activity area requirements are interfering with the ability in some instances to build affordable housing, like genuine affordable housing, because I would argue that missing middle housing is now high income earner prices. And so really trying to find a way to incentivize permanently affordable housing. And so I am open to amendments on the 50% as long as it goes higher, but also open to conversations. But basically my motion is to exempt permanently affordable deed restricted residences, or at least 50% of all units in a proposed development if more than one unit is proposed, from activity area requirements. Just because I think that when we have, you know, the bistro is a really good case in point where these folks want to build genuinely permanently affordable housing, and our rule is preventing them from doing that. And so, again, trying to find that middle ground and maybe perhaps even provide a bit of an incentive to build affordable housing, I thought to bring this amendment forward for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jordan. Any questions or comments in regards to this amendment? Any questions or comments? Councillor Anderson?
I'm sorry, I guess I'm just trying to track since Amendment 2 was passed. Therefore, Amendment 4, trying to think if, so basically this would make it so that if a housing development that was deed restricted was further away than a quarter of a mile from a park, they would be exempt from having to have any activity area. Because right now, anything within that, because of Amendment 2 passing, anything closer than a quarter mile or less doesn't have to meet the activity area threshold. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so that's.
Like, somebody help.
That's the amendment we passed, but Mr. Nugent's doesn't really address affordability, and that's why I wanted to bring this one forward, because of the really relevant case that's been brought to us related to the bistro and the permanently affordable housing that they want to put on there. And I can't, Mr. Lane, I cannot remember the total units versus that you want to build versus the ones that you can only build. Is it all right if he comes up and provides just a little bit
Certainly.
of
That's fine. You bet.
information about what you're proposing to build, but what our current plan will only allow you to build?
Thanks, Colin Lane, MMW Architects. Yeah, I have multiple projects. I think I've talked about the 3 projects representing a total of around 90 units. And without amendments that the code would allow those 3 projects to do about 60 total. Front steps project in particular would go from about 24 units down to maybe 6. But at that level, maybe it kills the whole project. So I've been sort of using 18 units as their benchmark, but it might be 24. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Lane, is the, now that we've passed the amendment with the quarter of mile, how many of these projects are further away than a quarter of a mile from a park?
Such a good question. Out of the 3 projects I'm working on right now, one of them is not affected by this at all in terms of the number of units. It is in terms of cost. There's Front Steps project, which is 18 units, and then there's another which is not affected by the quarter mile.
Meaning it's closer or further away?
It's further.
Okay.
The 3rd project is within that quarter mile. So I think there's 12 units of housing that was just saved here tonight for that project.
Just to clarify, so when you are providing comment, most of your comment is based on the original staff recommendations and not as we've been updating as we've been going? Not to put you on spot, I just am trying to like take into what you have to say as we are, it's a real life change.
It is, and and I've been using the same projects the whole time, using some of the same sort of slideshows that I've made available to each of you and to the staff and to the public. And so it's had to change a little bit over time, right? And including, 5 minutes ago. So yeah, I'm here to give you the up to the minute response. If that does this answer any questions?
Absolutely does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Lane, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming up. And we'll move on to, Councilor Anderson, you got your question answered? Okay, great. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, are we then looking to, just to be clear, a new subsection of 4.9.02 further down the line, its own subsection to do what it is you want to do, or are we just merely directing staff to incorporate, if this should pass, are we directing staff to somehow take it upon themselves to incorporate this, or what, where are you looking at putting this?
I have no idea. That's certainly something that's never crossed my mind. I don't know where most of this stuff's going to fit into our code. So Mike, you look like you're about to say something.
I would just say that if we pass this, they can put it where it needs to go. I think that's
That's
a
great.
reasonable answer for you to give.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to back that up, that as counselors, you don't have to worry about that specificity. That's what these experts can do. You can worry about the policy stuff. Absolutely. You bet. Thanks for clarifying that. Councilor Campbell, did you have any additional questions, Councilor? Okay. And Councilor Becerra.
Must be getting late because I forgot what my question was, but.
I can come back to you if you need.
Oh, no, I think my question was, how would we administer the administration of this? Would this be something that a developer would have to work with our housing community development division, or is this a parks? How do we keep track of, are we actually getting the 50% affordable units?
I think it would come in the development proposal when they submit it to CPDI, and then it would be regulated through there. But I only sent this to Erin, but we didn't really talk about it. Erin, can I put you on the spot maybe and ask you how perhaps we might, or Cassie?
Yeah, so we do have a definition of affordable housing in the UDC, and it does mention the housing being approved by the Office of Housing and Community Development, so our housing staff, just so that we can determine that it's actually affordable, actually deed restricted. Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah.
A lot of affordable housing projects have a mix of both market rate and affordable units. I'm wondering if this incentive would apply to all the units in that project or specifically just the affordable dwelling units.
I was thinking all the units.
Thank you.
Councilor Becerra, you got your question answered? Okay. And Councilor Nugent.
Thanks. To quickly clarify, you would apply to all the units so long as half the units at least are permanently affordable.
Correct,
So the
yeah.
benefit would be given to all because in the case where they're not all affordable, the 50% that aren't deed restricted are going to help subsidize the other ones.
They could, yeah, for sure. I mean, any, I guess, combination of, so I guess, Cassie, if 50% are market rate and 50% are permanently affordable, that would fit this criteria.
It's a little, I might need to think about this one. I'll share my screen just for reference. The way affordable housing is defined in the code does have different tiers that sort of dictate what percentage of the units are affordable and which sort of income levels they're serving. And so there might be some interest in trying to line it with our definition because this is what we consider an affordable housing project.
How would that change the language of my proposal? It looks like it would drop to less than 50% just on my quick initial scan. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if you were kind of following these affordability tiers, you'd just state affordable housing, and those housing staff would work with the developer to make sure it fits within these tiers and meets their requirements.
Okay. Would this work for you all if we modified the language to incorporate these definitions? Or do you want to think about it? You did say that.
That's a question.
Oh, that's for you, Cassie. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would make it clear for staff to implement and work with the existing processes in place for identifying affordable housing projects.
Okay. So then if I were to rewrite the language, it would be basically the definition of affordable housing rather than 50% of all units in a proposed development.
Correct.
You accept that amendment?
Yeah, I do. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yep.
All right. All right. So item number 4 has been amended, friendly amendment. Okay. All right. Thank you. And Councilor Nugent?
Yeah, I would just say that I will be in favor of this. Obviously, before serving on council, I was on the Housing Authority, and I know there, including you, Mayor, several people who have been involved in permanently affordable housing. And a lot of the people who build permanently affordable housing, such as what the mayor did at Homeward, I think will prioritize some of this stuff, even if it's not a requirement. But I also was in a meeting today where staff did talk about there are some permanently affordable housing advocates in the country that basically point out that we should strip everything from permanently affordable because we're letting it achieve some of those goals, and then the market speaks for itself a little bit. So I can see both sides of this one, but I will be supportive because I want to create the flexibility, especially now that Ms. Jordan includes the definitions that are in code.
Yeah, and I guess if I might add something.
Go ahead.
In this particular amendment, I don't want to address landscaping at all. Like, this is just activity areas, just to make sure that was clear.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Jones?
First of all, Ms. Jordan, is there a unit number that triggers this?
Just the definition of their permanently affordable housing.
I mean, like it's the size of like units in the building?
No.
So 1 unit or more? Okay, and then just a question to staff in terms of if staff has thoughts on the impact of this. Doing this type of tool where for affordable housing, things are pared back. I mean, the long-term ramifications or impact, or do you have thoughts on that?
I think it's something we would want to talk to our true affordable housing developers about. What we often see is, especially in low-income housing tax credit developments, where they might not be required to build it today, so it might be mixed-use development. We're still seeing some level of activity area built. So it might be that some level is still built. It just doesn't have to meet the specific standards that are outlined in our code. So off the top of my head, I think it would be hard to tell. I think we'd want to talk with some of those developers, but I think it would be likely that we would still see some level of activity or common space built. It might just look different. There may be some where we don't see any at all. And so I think, yeah, we'd have to find out a little bit more.
Thanks. I think I will vote for this. But also I think it is something that we want to be tracking and seeing how it works and seeing if this is what we want to be happening in Missoula. But given that we are trying to have a big paradigm shift and get the engine started to get more housing built, I think it's workable.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Councilor Krask.
Yeah, was just looking for some quick clarification about the units that Councilor Jones had a question about. But so it says if more than one unit is proposed, and to exempt from activity area requirements, but activity area requirements are for 10 units or more, correct?
Cassie's nodding her head behind you.
So would the language be 10 units or more, or?
I don't know that, it's not crucial to have that language for if more than one unit is proposed, since, activity area doesn't apply until 10 units. So really it would just be an exception for affordable housing within that.
Yeah.
There's not a need to clarify how many units are proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like to amend your amendment to strike? Is this a request for a cleanup?
I don't think I need to, do I, Cassie?
You don't need to, but it would clarify code a bit. I think it might make a little bit more sense, and then it would read I think how it would read, given the last amendment, would be a motion to exempt permanently affordable deed-restricted housing as defined in the UDC from activity area requirements.
Easy. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, absolutely. All right. Amended. We'll move on to the next counselor comment. Counselor Milson.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I'm just wondering if the assumption of affordability and amenity needs are potentially inversely related, in that low-income people, there's a lot of studies, I sent you one today, about how low-income residents usually receive fewer guarantees for on-site amenities, and yet they're the people that need them most because they don't have access or cars to travel or whatever. So I wonder if this kind of sets a precedent for use-based exemptions that then locks in on affordability and the in-access. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I'm wondering if this sets a precedent for use-based exemptions, first of all. So can staff maybe address that? This mic is hot. Sorry.
Can you clarify what you mean by use-based exemptions?
Yeah, I mean, if we're tying activity areas to affordability, I guess, is affordability a use-based exemption, would you think?
I don't believe we have it listed as a use. It still just falls under household living, though it is defined as a certain type of housing.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess my only questions are that relationship between access to green space, equity, and affordability. It's the only concern that I have. So.
I absolutely agree. I wish that we could develop everything everybody needs and wants. And I think that I just got struck by the fact that we are reducing our ability to build affordable housing by, as an example, almost 30% based on, one developer or architect's projects. And if we want to increase affordability, and these are permanently affordable, they're not anything that's ever not going to be permanently affordable. It felt like a good compromise in my head to try and find these permanently affordable units that actually give people an opportunity to live here, and provide more opportunities for people to live here by getting rid of these activity area requirements. I don't like it either. I wish that they could all be permanently affordable with tons of space. But it really gutted me listening to the example about the bistro and how few units they would be able to build. And they're an incredible, the Front Step's an incredible housing affordability ally in this town. And the fact that they couldn't build a really remarkable project really struck me. And it does mean that we don't all have access to the same things, but how do we weigh all these things up? Like, I want people to be able to stay here. When my kids still lived here, they were like, we'll never be able to afford to live here. So they moved to Australia, and they're all making $100,000 a year now, and they can afford their lives. So they had to move to another country, but that's not really very feasible here for a lot of folks. And so I just want to try and increase that permanently affordable housing piece. And I know it comes with some drawbacks.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Becerra.
Thank you for bringing this amendment forward. I think I'm in support of it. I do have a few concerns, but I do think that those could be addressed by working with different departments in the city. For example, I worry a little bit about equity in terms of our activity areas, that those members of the community who cannot afford to live in a place where that is required are going to be living in an area where they're not going to have access to an activity area because of, it's an affordable development. But I do think that by working with different departments in the city, maybe we can prioritize those areas for future investments so that we can either acquire land for public parks near those areas, or prioritize improvements of those parks so that people who live near these areas in these developments can have access to parks that offer what any other park would have. So I guess it's not an amendment or anything. I just want to flag it as something that maybe as this gets implemented, that we work with our staff to ensure that those, potential equity concerns get addressed. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. All right. Any additional comments or questions from council members for Councillor Jordan? All right, I'm not seeing any. Cassie did a great job at summarizing the amendment. So if you could read that before we take a roll call vote, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And Ms. Trimble, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, great. Take it away.
It's number 4 in this section. It's motion to exempt permanently affordable deed restricted housing as defined in the UDC from activity area requirements.
Okay, great. We have our amendment and we are ready for a roll call vote.
All right, beginning with Becerra.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Grass.
No.
Jones.
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
McCoy.
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Nugent.
Yes.
Taunton.
Yes.
Savage.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
And Anderson.
No.
That's 10 in favor, 2 opposed. The amendment does pass.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for your thoughtful conversation. We'll move on to the next amendment, and this is Counselor Melson. This is number 5 on page 7.
Thanks. So the best offense is a good defense, right? And that's what these three amendments are, basically just kind of defensive amendments to try and hold the line on staff recommendations for tree conservation and tree standards, tree class standards, I should say. And I've talked ad nauseum about why our urban forest is important, is critical, and is in need of being supported. So this is essentially just to hold the line on staff recommendations in section 4.902C, keeping the tree classes and base planning standards that staff have recommended. I don't believe the planning board made any amendments against the staff recommendations for tree standards other than in the landscape section. So just wanted to clear that up for folks so we're not. So, and I'm happy for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Newt. Cassie.
I think just a quick clarification. The letter that Planning Commission approved did modify this section.
Yeah. So I would like to, Cassie, help me out here. The letter that Planning Board adopted, staff at Parks was unsupportive of some of the changes in the tree classification standards, correct? So class 1 trees, it was recommended to change class 2 and 3 trees to class 1, correct?
Yeah, a little bit there. The letter gets rid of the different types of tree classes, and the reason that was added into code by staff was it allows for substitutions. For example, for a developer, citing one very large tree might be easier than citing 3 small trees. The Planning Commission approved letter does get rid of that flexibility tool. And it adds a little less clarity where you might end up with all class 1, which are smaller trees.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to prevent is the reduction in those tree standards and classifications. Class 1 trees are sort of ornamental. They're very small. They don't really provide the same level of community benefit as a class 2 or 3 tree. And then sort of allowing those substitutions does create the flexibility when the space is constrained. But I just really hope that we can ensure that tree canopy is prioritized with class 2 and 3 trees. That makes sense.
Counselor Nugent.
I have maybe a question or a statement. It seems like if we adopted this, but then we were going to take up the big amendment on Wednesday, it could be undone on Wednesday. And right now it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, that's
so.
what
Would it be easier just to offer that amendment in our discussion on Wednesday as like part of that one and say, hey, if you're going to pass this, you should do this?
Yeah, that's probably a smart way to do it.
I would recommend that.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, we'll postpone this amendment then.
Cool.
That sounds great. Thank you, Counselor Melson. That's number 5. How about number 6?
Yeah, so retaining parking lot landscaping standards and tree requirements. So the intent behind this is to retain the adopted draft parking lot landscaping requirements that include the 10% interior parking lot landscaping minimum and the associated tree requirements. The reasons for that, again, our urban forest, our tree canopy is incredibly important. The more trees we have, the better off our community is to resist the forces of climate change. Man, I need some water. And parking lots are really big sources of heat and runoff. And the standards mitigate those impacts. So I want those standards to stay in because parking lots are permeable surfaces. They're major heat generators for heat island impacts. And I think the standards directly mitigate those impacts. So yeah, We'll leave it there, open for questions.
Okay. Counselor Anderson.
So much, Madam Mayor. I guess I'm confused if this also falls under the same sort of larger conversation that number 5 did, that we're holding off till Wednesday.
Yeah, I think maybe I'd hold all 3 of these until we talk about landscaping.
That's fair.
Perfect.
It's always good when the city attorney walks away.
And then can I make a request of, and I guess I'm confused on what the difference of the language, if, when we get to the point on Wednesday discussing this, I guess I'm confused on what of this is changing language that already exists, or what of this is just basically saying this language exists and therefore it's super important because I really like it.
Correct.
And so we could be prepared for that, because, and Cassie is, I see, signaling that she would like the floor.
Yeah, I will go through that letter, like I said, and have bullet points addressing each point in the letter. Both of the items do relate to strike-throughs in the letter, and so in those bullet points, I can mention that it pertains to these amendments as well and explain sort of the evolution of the drafts, if that's helpful.
Okay, great. Excellent, thank you. All right, so it looks like, again, 4.9 site standards. Amendments 5, 6, and 7 we're going to hold for a conversation on Wednesday. Councilor McCoy, thank you for helping your fellow counselor out. Appreciate that. So that does take us beyond page 7. And checking in here, 10 to 10. How we doing, folks? Councilor Nugent.
Mayor Davis, I might suggest without objection that we refer this back to land use and planning. I think we're at a point where the next items are parking, and that might take a while.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I would also just say that in regards to the item we pushed back and Mr. Melson's ideas, we could split up that planning board amendment. So if there are things people like, things people don't like, we don't necessarily have to vote as one whole thing. So we
Okay.
should be able to address those kind of holistically, I think.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So for clarification for council and folks in the audience, 4.9 site standards, item number 3, item 5, 6, and 7, all are being held for conversation on Wednesday. Staff will provide material to provide easy, summarized planning board recommendations, and that planning board letter can be broken up in ways that that conversation can be held separately to consider those. Okay. Then that is going to wrap up our Unified Development Code conversation. We held public comment at the beginning. There are no votes being taken on the final document, so no public comment to end that. And so that does wrap up our public hearing portion of our agenda this evening. I want to thank all those members of our community for coming down and taking part in the conversation, sticking with us late into the evening. Council members, we have just a couple of agenda items and then we'll get you home and to bed. How about that? We're not quite done. Hold on. All right, so anything more to say on the Unified Development Code for preparation for Wednesday? Councilor Becerra.
Just for the public so that they know they can come and provide public comment on Wednesday as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. You bet. Okay. And the process, I would imagine, will be the same. Public comment will be taken at the beginning, and then that Land Use and Planning Committee will be workshopping each of the amendments that have been provided publicly, both on the table out there, but also online on our Engage Missoula site. Okay? Okay. All right, folks, thank you. We'll just, the good news is there's not much more on our agenda this evening, so nothing under new business, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. And we do have a few items on the consent agenda. And so, Ms. Trimble, if you could go ahead and share what is on the consent agenda on the screen and walk us through it.
All right. On this evening's consent agenda, we have a motion to ratify accounts payable or claims for checks dated January 20th, 2026 in the amount of $927,283.11. We have a second motion to approve accounts payable for checks dated January 27th, 2026 in the amount of $1,820,540.31. We have a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with Jacob Engineering Group, Inc. for the Resource Recovery Facility Digester 2 Mixer Replacement Project at a cost not to exceed $79,619. We have a motion to authorize the mayor to sign an addendum to the 2023 interlocal agreement between the City of Missoula and Missoula County for the development, for the Missoula Development Park. We have a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the contract amendment with Herrera Environmental Consultants for the Missoula Development Park at a cost not to exceed $153,309. And our final motion this evening is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign an amended city-county interlocal agreement for the land use and planning services 2026.
All right. Thank you very much. Claire, do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? All right, I'm not seeing any in the audience, and I'll just take a quick gander online to see if there's anybody online that wishes to make public comment on the consent agenda. All right, no public comment on our consent agenda. Do any council members wish to separate any of the items or wish to retain their vote? Nope. All right. We can voice vote on this one, please. Claire, go right ahead.
All right, all in favor of this evening's consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed by like sign? And that passes unanimously.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Our next item is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So if there is anybody in the audience that wishes to make comment for items that are not on the agenda, and you haven't spoke on this earlier, now's your time. Okay. Not seeing anyone in the audience. Check online to see if we have any hands raised. We do not. Okay. Public comment for items not on the agenda is concluded. I have already delivered my communications from the mayor, other than to say thank you all so much for continuing with this complex work. And I'll turn it over to general comments of city council members, and I'll start with you, Councilor Jordan.
Thank you. I apologize, I know it's late, but I had a constituent reach out to me today or the other day and asked me if I would read about the post-admission refugee re-verification and integrity strengthening program, also known as Operation Paris. This program was launched by the Department of Homeland Security and USCIS in January 2026. In simple terms, it allows the federal government to reopen and re-examine refugee cases after people have already been admitted to the United States, even though those individuals previously went through extensive vetting and were lawfully approved as refugees. So far, the program has started in Minnesota, focusing on thousands of refugees who have not yet received permanent resident status. It includes new background checks, re-interviews, and full reviews of their original asylum claims. This is unprecedented. It's led to arrests and detention. It's re-traumatizing refugee communities, and there are concerns about discriminatory impact as it relates to disproportionately targeting Black and Brown refugee communities. And I just wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. I hadn't heard about it. One of my best friends from Australia is here on a green card in Los Angeles, and this could potentially affect him. And I think it's distressing, and it is a waste of government resources, and it's meant to target states that aren't following a larger political platform, and I wanted to raise awareness and also speak that I think it's an incredible waste of time and causing too much harm. Otherwise, I guess I'd also just like to speak to the unrest across the country generally, and know that it's affecting us all in different ways. And I appreciate the city council a lot. I feel like the new people on council are bringing a really amazing vibe. There's so many questions that are being asked, and these conversations that we're having really mean a lot to me, because it feels like we're actually negotiating and collaborating and finding the best way forward together. And so I feel really good about being on council with everyone right now. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you, Councilor Jordan, for your comments. And Councilor McCoy.
I'm good, thanks.
All right, you bet. Councilor Anderson?
Just thanks so much, Madam Mayor, for your comments at the beginning and for all the work that you have been engaging in, kind of in very unprecedented times over the last year. And I appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate the leadership of Chief Collier and the kind of intention in which he tries to thread this needle, and really is truly, there's two types of policing sort of mentality. There's the warrior and the guardian, and I feel he really exemplifies the guardian and really looking out for all of us in our community. And I really appreciate him highlighting the ways in which the Missoula Police Department is here showing up for everyone in our community, regardless of your immigration status, that they're here to protect and serve all of us. So thanks so much for that.
Appreciate your comments very much. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councilor Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll pass tonight.
Okay. And Councilor Cheryl?
Yeah, I was actually going to say something very similar to what Ms. Anderson just said. I'm really thankful for your comments and the sensitivity in which you came into office being sensitive to that. And we had discussed that when I was council president. And I feel very fortunate to have Chief Collier as our police chief, and an uncertain feeling time for our country, and we're lucky to have him locally. And I like the warrior versus what was it, guardian, and he does feel like a guardian for our community, and I'm just feeling appreciative of that during this tumultuous time.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Councilor Cheryl. Councilor Nugent?
I would just echo the thanks to you and Chief Collier for speaking to, I think, very pertinent issue that people wanted to hear from the city about. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate your leadership. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Councilor. Our pleasure. Councilor Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Chief Collier, for good words tonight. And I wanted to say thank you to Councilor Mike Nugent for hundreds of hours spent on, I know staff has spent so much time on code reform and the mayor, but we wouldn't be where we are right now without Mike Nugent doing a lot of heavy lifting. And so you are leading on this issue, and I really appreciate it.
Well said. Most definitely. Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Jones. Councilor Sutledge?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo my colleagues. I do really appreciate your leadership, Mayor. I really appreciate having a conversation with you this week, and feeling really heard and seen, and also like you've got things under control, basically. And I really appreciate the police chief coming tonight as well. Yeah, and just having sort of watched things unfold all weekend, and wanting to stop watching because it's been so horrific. I guess I just wanted to sort of echo that, like, I stand behind Minnesota and sort of the people there, and their resistance is beautiful, and I've really appreciated that piece of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Councilor Becerra?
A couple of things. One of the public commenters today suggested that we needed to do more to engage with the community, and I just want to, put it on the record that there are many ways that you can engage with City Council. Many of us attend a lot of the neighborhood council meetings. Sometimes we go to the neighborhood council leadership meetings. We get emails, phone calls. I set up times to meet in person with a lot of my constituents. So I would encourage members of the community who want to have a more conversations with city councilors to reach out to us. I think we're all pretty amenable to meeting, and I just want to make sure that that's on the record. I know that it's hard to find that information sometimes, but I think our emails and our phone numbers are pretty readily available. I do want to thank you, Mayor, for sharing with us in the community all the different tools that we're using to ensure that we are remain safe, that we remain protected. And I really appreciated Chief Collier's explanation of all the different ways in which we can be better prepared for when the time comes, if it comes. So I really appreciate that, and all the efforts that you have been leading up until now. So I know it's years of preparation and conversations with members of the community to ensure that we can be feel prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Becerra. Councilor Ponton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Davis. Just want to start by echoing a lot of other comments and say thank you for your remarks earlier today, and thank you for your leadership at this time. Huge thanks to Chief Collier for making it down as well. I've never had anything but the utmost respect for Missoula PD, but after 2-3 weeks into the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy, it's just super clear that department is just run with the utmost integrity, and it's been a great experience. So highly recommend if you haven't done that yet. Lastly, I think today marks all of week 3 on council for me. It's been a big project to hop into, so I just wanted to take just a second and thank everyone here for all of your, sort of help and guidance navigating this, and then huge thanks to staff as well. I mean, emails, calls, meetings, just so responsive, and that does not come easy. This is a big project, so sincere thanks to everyone there. That's it.
We're glad you keep coming back, Councilor Ponton. Councilor Grass.
Thank you. I too will just echo my gratitude for your comments earlier tonight, and for Chief Collier coming to speak with us and speak with the community. I've had a lot of questions from constituents and from folks. Being at the rally yesterday on the Bear Tracks Bridge felt really inspiring, and people had a lot of questions, and I think a lot of those were answered tonight, which is super helpful. So point them to the meeting if they weren't tuning in. And I think that, I will also say that the Missoula PD had a really calm presence at the rallies yesterday. I noticed them being there, and it was a really organized, for being something having been so quickly organized. I thought it was a really great event, and just showed Missoula standing with Minnesota and having that right to speak and to have peaceful protest. Somebody during public comment mentioned today that we will move forward together when they were talking about the We the People Amendment Day. And I just want to echo that there's so many things that feel really difficult. And in this code reform process in UDC, there's a lot of conversations that feel really difficult, but I feel really heartened in working with everyone on council and city staff, and from this little piece to the bigger parts of our nation, I do really believe that we'll move forward together. And so thank you.
Really appreciate your comments. Thank you so much. Councilor Melson.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I also want to glom on and thank you for your words, and for Chief Collier's words. I think you guys both displayed real leadership tonight. And I hope our community can see that in the recording. Hopefully it gets distributed somehow. I had a lot more to say about the moment this weekend. It hit me really hard, but I think haven't been performing well tonight, so I'm just going to hold off on there, and just want to also say thanks to my colleague for the hookup on the water.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Very grateful for all of your comments, and want to acknowledge the 2 officers in the room, and I hope that you heard the support from our city council this evening, as well as community members here. Appreciate your ongoing service and integrity, and your ethical work that you do here in our community. Thank you so much. And with that, folks, I'm happy to adjourn the meeting, 10:09 p.m.